How's it going?
Pretty good.
It's wedding season. It's getting close.
By the time this airs, I think I'll be a married woman.
Oh my gosh.
Just wait
Life
till
is lifing.
The next episode, I'll be a total basket case because we'll be even ever much closer.
You'll have the post-honeymoon dip. Have you heard of that? Have they warned you about that? All the scheduling and planning and prioritizing you, and then on the other side, you're not important anymore, and then everyone gets real sad, or brides get real sad.
It's so funny because I love attention, and then when I get it, I'm like, I don't know what to do with it.
I don't want this attention. I don't know what to do with my attention hands.
Pretend to be shy. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
It's hot in Pittsburgh right now.
It really is. I think it's hot everywhere.
That's just the theme.
That's what I've been trying to remind myself is it was real rainy for a few weeks and everyone was saying how terrible the weather was. And every time I'd look on the Doppler map, it was like the entire East Coast. Yeah. And now we're in a heat wave. And yeah, it's a rough season in terms of weather, but we make do. At least the sun is shining today.
I'll take this. I'll take the sunshine. And I love like storms too in the summertime. It was like, it was terrifying yesterday, but it was fun.
Yeah, very sudden.
Well, we're back.
We're here. We made it.
Episode 3, season 5.
Yes.
We're finally starting to settle into our space.
Yeah, this is feeling comfy.
Feels like home.
Yeah, Remy's napping, so she's content.
We've got a little doggy off camera. You probably see it in the wide angle.
Yeah, right here. Right here.
She burps and farts way less than Apollo did.
That is a fact, and did way less than Axel did too, because he was the main culprit. But yes, she is a very, very quiet, content little pup.
Yeah, we miss Apollo. We don't miss the farts.
No, that is well said. I miss him like crazy, but the toots can stay where they are.
Well, I'm excited for today.
Yeah, it sounds like we've got quite the list of our core 6 topics. I'm excited to dig into them.
Yes.
You got me. This time I don't have allergies, so I'm a little more clear, and I'll be able to get a little more energetic than episode 2.
Let's go. Well, I had my caffeine. I had my ibuprofen. I'm ready to go.
Just drugged up and ready to do it. Okay. Just some casual recreational drug use.
This is almost 30.
It gets worse.
It gets worse. Okay, that's good to know. Good to know. I'm prepared. Okay, should we just roll into our first topic?
Yeah, speaking of allergies, huh?
Speaking of allergies, this is one we've been getting a lot lately. What is the difference between an allergy, a sensitivity, and an intolerance? I feel like when any of my clients have any symptom, we're always thinking like, is it a food? Or the client's always asking me like, is it something I'm allergic to? Is it something I'm intolerant to? What is even the difference? A lot of people will say I have X sensitivity, gluten sensitivity, dairy sensitivity, but we find out it might actually be an intolerance, and that actually changes how we navigate forward. So anyways, tell us the difference. Allergy, sensitivity, and tolerance.
They are not synonyms is the first thing I'll say. And I think that's what you were kind of alluding to there. A lot of times those words are used interchangeably, and they are not really interchangeable, especially sensitivity and intolerance. Those are the two that I think kind of overlapped the most. So they are 3 separate buckets, and to your point, based on what you have, what we do about it is very different. And so first you have allergy, and that is one I think that is better understood, but still tossed around a little bit. An allergy is an immune response specifically to a protein in something.
Yep.
And so if you're allergic to strawberries, it's typically the little seeds on the strawberry that has the protein in it. You're allergic to that protein. To condense and consolidate, the protein comes into the body's immune system perceives that protein as a foreign invader, and your immune system basically attacks or goes nuts. And so when we talk about an allergy, it is usually a full body reaction. So it is your immunoglobulin E specifically, which is the subset of your immune system army that gets activated. And it tends to be a full body reaction, which is why things like anaphylaxis can take place, which is when all of a sudden your lungs, swell up and your entire body starts to go nuts, and it's life-threatening. So allergy, think full body immune reaction.
Yep.
Sensitivity is what I call a local immune reaction. So that's your immunoglobulins A and immunoglobulin G. Those two are more of our local. So they're the National Guard to our military as a way to think about it in our immune system.
You've always got the analogies.
You know me. I've been doing this a long time, girl. So we've got sort of our local armies. And so they respond in the same way to a protein of some kind, and they cause a local response, and that can mean localized inflammation. A lot of times problems, that locale is in the gut. And so food sensitivity testing is a common thing if you're investigating your body's local gut-specific immune response to the certain foods that it may be responding to. They are not as dangerous as a full-blown IgE-mediated reaction. They're not likely to cause anaphylaxis. They're not likely to have those acute life-threatening realities, but they can cause small local irritations that build up over time and create all sorts of digestive issues and can have downstream consequences if they're not acknowledged over the course of years.
Yeah.
A lot of people do notice a symptomology related to it. There was a lot of popularity of the idea and group, the LEAP testing, way back in about 10 or 15 years ago. They were the original sensitivity test group that really used that as a process or framework to help people identify. And that's why they got mixed results, is if someone had food sensitivities, worked really well. If they didn't, then it didn't work really well. No different than the FODMAP diet, right? If people are lacking the enzyme, which would say they have an intolerance, we're going to get to that one in a sec, it works well. If not, it doesn't. So far we have allergy, which is full body immune response, sensitivity, which is local, typically gut response. And then we have intolerance. And your intolerance is actually typically the acknowledgement that you're lacking an enzyme or some part of the digestive process. The most common one is lactose intolerance, right? That means that your body does not have enough of or any of the lactase enzyme that breaks down lactose. So it goes through your small intestine undigested, and then it gets basically eaten by your gut bacteria and creates all sorts of gas and can create loose stools and a lot of discomfort. So you can hear where lactose intolerance is different than having a sensitivity to dairy, which is different than having an allergy to dairy. Dairy allergy means full body reaction, could be very dangerous. Dairy sensitivity means that the casein in the dairy, dairy has two types of protein, casein and whey. And then within casein, there's two subtypes, and usually beta casein is the type of protein that people have a sensitivity to. Getting a little downstream, apologies.
Now you know why our job is so fun.
Oh,
and truly,
exactly.
How do you understand or parse any of this stuff out if you're not a dietitian? I have no idea.
You may listen to what I'm saying just to continue to say, I have a gluten intolerance, even though we've just outlined that you probably have a gluten sensitivity or a gluten allergy. But it's to hear where there are these categories. They are recognizing that your body is not responding to it well, but how they're not responding is key. And the reason is the intolerance is typically a lacking of an enzyme. If you lack the enzyme, we may be able to give you that enzyme. Enter any person that's ever used Lactaid products.
A lot of times that's how I will parse things out with a client, trying to decide if it's an insensitivity or an allergy. Is like, we'll have this food with the supplemental enzyme that should help break it down. And if that still doesn't help, then that was not the problem.
Yes, well said. That's one of the easiest ways to assess. Instead of sending them to do hundreds of dollars in sensitivity testing, why don't we rule out an intolerance by utilizing either a specific enzyme or a broad spectrum enzyme? It's the $20 test instead of the $300 test. And like you said, if the intolerance is the problem, giving the enzyme will likely fix the problem. A FODMAP diet is an intolerance elimination diet. We covered eliminations in the last episode, but that is the observation that there are specific carbohydrates that we often don't make enough enzymes for, lactose being one of them. So you can start with the intolerance suspicion. Allergies are usually fairly obvious, which is to say they're full body. So there's hives or skin or dermatitis issues or some sort of breathing issue or itching or something that's more full bodied and recognizable. Sensitivities are the ones that are kind of in that weird middle that are kind of hard to figure out. The other reason is because sensitivities cause localized inflammation, but inflammation is what I like to call a bucket. There's a tipping point at which inflammation is so bad that it creates symptomology. And so that's what ends up happening with the sensitivity is you may not actually have to avoid the food altogether. One, how sensitive are you, which is to say how big of a localized reaction does the food create? Two, how inflamed are you in general? Because you may have a food that is a mild sensitivity, but if you're otherwise uninflamed, it's just a quote unquote drop in the bucket.
Yep.
But if you're in a highly stressed, highly inflamed and, physical reality, and then you eat that same food, that food could be the drop in the bucket that spills the bucket over and creates symptoms. So with sensitivity testing, that's the other criticism of it, is it's not truly diagnostic. What that phrase means is just because you have a sensitivity doesn't mean declaratively you shouldn't eat it. Allergy equals avoid.
Absolutely.
Sensitivity is a spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. And intolerance means intervention. That's, I like to have that little alliteration on the ASI.
Can we say that one more time?
Yeah. So we have the allergy equals avoid. Sensitivity is on a spectrum. And intolerance means there's an intervention. And
Beautifully said.
If, again, we'll go through that slower, but if there's an allergy, we're just not going to eat it. That's something we should avoid. There are really interesting allergy reintroductions and, microdosing that can help with allergies, but it's to say for general dietitian intervention, we're going to say, hey, those are foods we shouldn't be eating.
Yeah, that should be like a very supervised thing, medically supervised.
Well said. The sensitivity side, we can definitely navigate that spectrum with them. That may be doing a sensitivity test, which they're not extremely affordable. They're more affordable than they used to be. But a sensitivity test is going to come back and show you no response, low response, medium response, high response. But what's tricky is the measurements of low to high are a ridiculous range. It'll be a low response is 0 or is a 1 to 30. A medium response is 30 to 70. A high response is 71 to 14,000. And it's like, why are we treating a 71 like a 14,000? We may not need to. So there's a spectrum there. So we go, okay, yes, the higher the sensitivity response, the more likely it is to be an issue. But then we still don't know, is it an issue on its own? Which is to say, you consume it in any amount and it's a problem. If so, we're going to treat that one more like an allergy. If you can consume it in small amounts or in moderation, that's something that's worth exploring. If you can consume it and not have it paired with other sensitivity foods, that's worth exploring. Or if it's something you avoid or minimize during periods when you're otherwise very inflamed. I have a client in particular who their sensitivity to fish shows up when they're super stressed. So when they're highly stressed, which is to say their bucket of inflammation is already high, fish is enough of a sensitivity to spill the bucket over. But when they're in a relaxed environment, they can consume fish without any issue whatsoever. So that's that weird gray area.
It's like the person who can eat fish on vacation.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. And that this person I'm talking about would be an example of that. When they're not stressed, their inflammation systems aren't as backlogged, their body flushes, their liver catches up, all their body systems catch up, and all of a sudden they can handle the mild inflammatory response or sensitivity related to that food. And so sensitivity is on a spectrum. It doesn't mean we should avoid it forever. Doesn't mean you can't have it. It means it may be contributing, and now we want to assess your bucket of inflammation, whether dietary or lifestyle, and then within diet, let's look at that. And if we have a bunch of high sensitivity foods that we're eating in combination, that may spill the bucket over. So as dietitians, we spend time helping people figure out the line. What are the ones that we actually should just avoid? What are the ones that we should avoid in certain circumstances? What are the ones we might not want to pair very well? Let's navigate that gray. And then an intolerance is typically what can we do to intervene? Sometimes it is minimizing, but a lot of times it's supplementing.
It's like a great example of this really is root cause medicine. It really is. Can I tell a client story? I wasn't planning on sharing. So this is related to an intolerance. I had a client who was going through pancreatic cancer treatment and started to malabsorb fats, was finding fat like oil in his stool, and was like rapidly losing weight, having tons of pain and digestive discomfort. And it was the oily stool that really made me think like, I think I know what this is. It's something called steatorrhea, which means, you're malabsorbing fat and it's getting excreted because your body can't absorb it. And that made a lot of sense to me because he was navigating pancreatic cancer. But his cancer team is very used to seeing a lot of digestive discomfort and symptoms during cancer treatment because of how the drugs impact the body. But we just did a little test run and we added in some pancreatic lipase, and immediately his problem was solved. So that was like a very clear example of like, this was an intolerance, and it was due to an insufficiency of pancreatic enzymes, specifically lipase, which would make sense why we weren't producing enough pancreatic enzymes if we're dealing with pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
And it was very easily fixable. He went through treatment. Now he's able to eat as normal now that his pancreas is kind of rehabilitated from treatment.
Well, that's great for him, first of all, but also what a testament to collaborative care.
Yeah.
You have these oncologists that are busy dealing with some of the most intense issues and struggles in modern
I can't
health.
do what they do.
No, absolutely not. Won't even pretend they're, only flowers to give on that front. But there are things downstream that also are worthy of support, and you start to hear the outcomes benefit. Without your role, he continues to lose weight and get physically weaker and weaker and weaker, which means he's unable to do the things required to beat the cancer. Mm-hmm. Because most cancer interventions at this point are poison the body just enough to kill the cancer, but not kill you. Mm-hmm. That is our strategy. And it's gotten more and more effective, and it's getting more and more targeted. So now it's try and poison certain areas instead of 20, 30 years ago where it was basically poison the whole body, and hope that because the cancer cells, they divide faster, they also die faster kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But we're getting more and more targeted, but ultimately we still are really, really using blunt force tools in that mm-hmm. world. And so keeping a body strong during that's what we call nutrition support. Yeah. It's a case for dietitian in that role for sure, but congrats to him for beating it.
One more funny story is a dietitian who used to work on our team at a bachelorette party. I will let her remain unnamed. But we went out to brunch one morning and we had a lot of French toast and pancakes and just like really bacon heavy foods. And
I know exactly who this is.
Everyone came back from the brunch and was just like clutching their stomachs like, oh my God, I feel terrible. And of course, this dietitian, wicked smart, starts handing out digestive enzymes to people.
You get a lactate, you get an enzyme, you get a galactosidase.
Just as like a little boost in digestive support, and man, did it work. And since then, I keep them in my cabinet, especially for dinner parties and things.
Reason number 170 to be friends with a dietitian. They bring enzymes. There.
They come prepared.
Oh, man, I love that. Great share.
Oh, my gosh. Anyway, so that was a great explanation. So there's allergy, there's sensitivity, there's intolerance. We want to figure out which one it is because we can approach it differently. The other cool thing about like something like an intolerance is like when you add in that like a lactate, for example, all of a sudden you can't enjoy ice cream again. Yeah. Or in the case of like someone who has congenital sucrase maltase deficiency, which I see every once in a while, it's like we could just give them sucrate and all of a sudden they can live a very normal life now, whereas someone who truly has an allergy or sensitivity, very different.
Yes, that's why it's so important. Is people calling if it's an intolerance and they're calling it an allergy, if it's an allergy, we're avoiding it. If it's an intolerance, we're intervening. And so if you have an intolerance and you're calling it an allergy, you're avoiding instead of intervening, which means you're being more restrictive than you need to be. Yeah. So there's different pathways, and yeah, that's the role that we get to play. It's one of my favorite ones to help people navigate, especially because, to your point, it's so misunderstood. It's I'm allergic to this thing, and it's like, well, no, you're not, because that's not science. But let's talk about what symptomology are you dealing with. Let's better understand why you say you're allergic. What do you mean when you say you're allergic? Because you don't mean it in the word. But hopefully now everyone listening understands 1,000-foot view what an allergy, sensitivity, and intolerance is, and can hopefully better navigate for their own personal benefit.
My last note is the one scenario where an sensitivity, an intolerance, or even a preference can turn into an allergy is when you're at a restaurant. As a server, everyone had an allergy to something. Yeah. Crazy how that works.
Isn't it funny? That is. Because it's a spectrum, there's that. If I say allergy, no one's gonna debate it. Right?
Written in red on your ticket.
It's the difference between a service dog and a well-trained dog. If I'm being honest.
She's right there.
Hey, Rem. She's knocked out. I'm proud of her.
Oh, okay. So next.
Yes.
We'll do our ingredient obsession. This is maybe a loose version of this ingredient obsession, but you sent me an email recently that was insane. I love it. It was basically like an advertisement promoting the sugar diet.
The sugar craze.
Tell us about the sugar diet, because this is so antithetical to much of the low-carb, keto, carnivore trend that's also going on. Of course, we have to have the simultaneous opposite extreme. So tell me about the sugar diet.
Well, I think that's why I sent it to you, too, is because here we are in the middle preaching boring old moderation, but this thing acting like it's a craze, it's just basic science. And it's so funny to me because it's in direct juxtaposition to the carbs will kill you, right? Carbs are what's making everyone so fat. That's the there's a lot of that narrative out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come out with a diet where the person eats exclusively carbohydrates and loses a bunch of weight. And just like the carnivore diet, eating only protein and fat, right, has very predictable effects. So does this one. Because at the end of the day, an attempt to blame a singular macronutrient is incorrect.
Red flag.
Yeah. Carbs are bad is not correct. Fats are bad is not correct. They are energy. Our body needs energy. So what happens when you are missing one of them? You end up initiating systems of survival that cause your body to disproportionately use one versus the other.
Yep.
And the way those nutrients, macros, fats, and carbs affect the body are amplified in an obvious way. So just like we'll do the antithesis and then we'll dig into this sugar craze because it'll be a longer ramble. The whole point of a ketogenic diet is to deplete the body of carbohydrates so that it's forced to use fat as its main fuel. It converts fats into ketones so that the brain can utilize ketones as its backup. And that triggers an initial depletion of glycogen, which causes acute weight loss. It does it does force the body to burn more fat, which means in theory, assuming there's a caloric deficit, the fat depletion is easier, essentially.
The reason why fat burning and fat loss is not the same thing.
Well said. Yes, exactly.
Fat burning just means you're using fat as a fuel source potentially as opposed to carbohydrates.
Yeah. The ultimate question comes down to whether you're in a ketogenic state burning 100% of fat as your energy, or whether you're in a properly balanced fed state, you're burning 40% fat as energy. The ultimate question is, are you eating the amount that you're burning, or are you eating more than you're burning, or are you eating less than you're burning? And we can simplify that by saying calories in, calories out, or we can break it down with bioenergetics and say your body burns a certain amount of carbs and fats per day based on activity and reality. Mm-hmm. And we can either give you too much of one, too much of both, not enough of one, not enough of both. And that is going to have very predictable consequences. So just like keto creates a depletion of glycogen, which causes rapid weight loss, causes leptin to basically calm down, which drives the satiety so people don't feel as hungry. These are downstream consequences that then 6 months later slow metabolism, because as leptin gets lower and lower, and so that lack of hunger is literally a result, essentially a side effect of your metabolism slowing down because you're relying on your backup generator. Mm-hmm. So that is what happens on that side. Carbohydrates spike leptin. So carbohydrates drive basically the leptin ghrelin system that is hunger and fullness. But when it spikes leptin, it makes a disproportionate reality where it can actually stimulate metabolism and then as a result stimulates hunger. So carbohydrates do spike your appetite, mm-hmm. which is not inherently a bad thing. That's not saying like carbs make you fat because they make you hungry. It's like, no, carbs drive your appetite system. So we want to recognize that if you only eat carbohydrates, one, your body is immediately lacking in protein and fats, both of which are essential to human flourishing. Protein is our building block. Fat is the baseline. It's actually a building block and also a cofactor and coenzyme for hormone production. We need those nutrients. So to be without them puts your body in a state of survival. Mm-hmm. And so then you eat a whole bunch of carbohydrates, and the things that slow digestion down and regulate the balance of appetite on the seesaw that is hunger and fullness go away. And your body's metabolism, in an attempt to try and catch up and basically survive, starts going nuts. Mm-hmm. And there was a study, I want to say it was in 2012 or 2013. It was before my master's. And I did a project on it in my one class. It was my research methodology class. But long story short, it studied the observation that when you gave people only carbohydrates, they reported hunger at obscene calorie levels, but they also didn't gain weight as you would expect. Mm-hmm. And the study in particular, it had one of the groups was eating over 13,000 calories a day because of reported hunger cues. So they were just carbs only, just going nuts, just eating and eating and eating and eating and eating. And they could not get full, but also over the 6 months, there was an expectation that they were going to gain like somewhere around like 50 pounds, mm-hmm. and they gained like 8.
It sounds like me when I'm like training for a marathon.
Yeah, exactly. You're insatiable.
Eating and eating and eating.
So all to come full circle, this sugar craze diet is the observation that if you only eat carbohydrates, you will lose weight. It's like, well, yes, one, you have no protein, which means your protein malnutrition is going to start. You're going to start breaking down. You're not going to have optimized tissue protection is what I'll say there. Two, you don't have adequate fats, which means there's other hormonal systems that are going to start to be affected. Three, the presence of carbohydrates does spike metabolic rate in a pretty meaningful way. So you can eat a whole bunch of food, carbohydrates specifically, and yes, your body will lose weight. But is it, that's true, but is it relevant? It's one of my favorite phrases I've been telling you about recently.
Yeah.
Is it true that that can happen? Yes. Is it relevant to you and human flourishing? No. Is it relevant to your health journey? No, it's not health. It's just science. We tend to see these fringes of things like, wow, if I eat only meat, I can still survive. And these things happen. It's like, cool, that's interesting. Oh, I only eat carbohydrates and this happens. Oh, that's interesting. What can we learn from those things is not, oh, this is how I should be eating. Mm-hmm. We're basically just seeing what happens at the extremes so that we can come to the middle and recognize that there is a reason why some degree of carbohydrate is valuable. It is the antithesis to fat in the leptin ghrelin spike that is hunger and fullness. So having enough carbohydrates and enough fats with each other is going to drive appropriate hunger and appropriate fullness. If we do them in the right quantities, we will also have an energy adequacy that will allow us to either gain weight, maintain weight, or lose weight. Mm-hmm. And so these edges, it's not new information. Like I said, I'm citing a study from 13 years ago that we already know this. In the world of bioenergetics, we understand what the body does when carbohydrates are exclusively present, and we understand what happens when only fats or only proteins are exclusively present. People finding this and making it common knowledge and then turning it into a diet is a ridiculous distraction from reality.
Diet culture at its peak.
Yeah.
We've really lost the plot.
Yes, that's you're missing the entire point. Can we also for a moment think about what a 100% carbohydrate diet is?
It's literally just sugar.
Like bread has protein.
It's very
grains have protein.
Your diet is drinking syrup, basically.
I mean, we could make an argument for fruit because the protein is nominal, but it's literally pure sugar is what you're consuming.
It's like the keto diet. Like if the true ketogenic diet is also like mainly like heavy cream and butter.
Yeah,
like
it's 80% fat, and you go, we start to hear like, I hope you can hear that this doesn't get you very far. Right, there's no longevity in this. It's like, yeah, so I'm just going to pop sweet tarts and Twizzler ropes and nerds until I die. Or, like you said, I'm going to put butter on everything. You know what this hunk of steak needs? Butter. You start to recognize that, yes, the studying of energy and, again, bioenergetics, which is basically the utilization of fats and carbs, I find fascinating, and we can nerd out about it. And as you know, I mean, something that we do that people don't realize is we can actually break down how much carbohydrate and fat someone burns in a day given activity to a scary level of accuracy. Mm-hmm. Observing the fringes, which is what happens when only one macronutrient is present, is interesting to show the importance of that one, but also the importance of the other ones. And that becomes the game. Is if you're someone who's actually doing this because you're trying to lose a quick 10 pounds, that is coming right back because you are breaking your physiology by doing this. You are pushing your body to an extreme that is not sustainable. And so you are getting results from something that is not rooted in habit or routine. Mm-hmm. You are creating a short-term temporary outcome from a short-term temporary input, and it is not to your greater good. And so step back and go, why are you trying to lose the 10? Mm-hmm. And is that actually connected? said another way. Is it worth abandoning your goal of health on your health journey?
Yeah.
At some point, that becomes that game where people are trying to be healthier.
May diverge.
Yeah, they're trying to be healthier. And for a lot of people, the habits they would live to be healthier would cause weight loss because a lot of people do carry extra weight because they're not living optimally. So weight loss is commonly correlated with health. Yeah. But somewhere along the way, people forget that the goal is health and they think the goal is actually just weight loss. They focus on that outcome, the scale going down instead of the scale going down as a side effect of supporting myself better. It's the scale going down by any means necessary. This is another example of by any means necessary. It's I'm going to manipulate a very predictable biologic system and cause it to do something temporary. And then you go, why? If the answer is because in the name of science, cool, go nuts. But if it's rooted in anything about your health and well-being, run. This is stupid. It makes no sense to do it. Let the nerds nerd, let the science, but that doesn't mean you need to destroy your life.
You do not need to be a science experiment.
Yeah. And that's coming from a guinea pig. You know me,
Yeah,
I love the science.
To, try different diets out in college too, just out of curiosity to how my body would respond. And those days
notice
are long
where that
over.
comes from? Curiosity of how the body responds. That is you being a scientist. If that's where this comes from, yes, you will find that short-term periods of only carbohydrate consumption drive ridiculous hypermetabolic realities. Mm-hmm. Your basal metabolic rate can more than double. And so it'll blow your mind. You'll be eating thousands and thousands of calories a day and not getting full, and also not skyrocketing on the scale like you'd expect.
We could hear how that would be appealing, but in practice, it's not fun.
It's true, but is it relevant? Is it meaningful? It goes back to us as mediators of information. Great. What are we going to do with this information?
Yeah.
Can we come back around and maybe say that with this information, we've proven that maybe carbs aren't the devil? Mm-hmm. That's what I'd love to come back around on and say, oh, what do you know? The same things that the low carb advocates are touting has similar truths from the carb only. Mm-hmm. So can we recognize that maybe our association of carbohydrate increases in our diet alongside obesity means that the carbohydrate isn't actually the problem? And can we zoom out a little bit and recognize that our attempt to demonize any macronutrient has failed miserably, because it's not a problem of the macronutrient, it's a higher level problem of total energy intake. Yeah. We're sitting here, we know that the average American consumes 3,600 calories a day, takes like 3,000 steps a day, which means the average American burns under 2,500 a day. So the average human in the United States eats 1,000 more calories a day than they need. And we have the idea that we need to then go, oh, well, it's got to be carbohydrates or it's got to be fats. It's an overabundance of both.
It would be so easy to just demonize one thing, because that would make our lives so much simpler and easier. And that is like the classic psychological phenomenon of black and white thinking. And unfortunately, the world is not like that.
Remember when we were meeting the other day and I shared with you the phrase simplicity has consequences? Mm-hmm. That.
Oversimplifying everything.
When we oversimplify things, it has consequences.
What I hear this sugar diet is like, we're taking a true physiological phenomenon of the increased metabolic rate associated with increased carbohydrate intake, and we are jumping to massive conclusions.
We are extrapolating.
Extrapolating that to make it something that is no longer relevant or helpful to us.
Yes, it's true, but is it relevant?
Yeah.
And that's us as mediators. The whole point of this podcast is to bring people to have the conversation and meet in the middle. Is what do I want people to take away from this? And it's that carbs alone are not the problem. Mm-hmm. So for every person out there that thinks that carbs make them fat, you have a profound misunderstanding of biology and of science.
Yep. It's like the midwit, like, just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
You know what carbohydrates are, and you know that they can increase appetite. So it's like, now it's like we're demonizing carbs. It's like we were talking about this the other day, the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like there is a point at which you know a little, and it can sometimes work to your detriment because you think that you know a lot. Mm-hmm. But I love that concept of the midwit. There's like the person who knows almost nothing, and like, let's say as it pertains to nutrition in this case, be like, eat protein, lift weights, end of story. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have like the really wise person that's like, yeah, you need to lift weights and eat protein and eat, the appropriate number of calories. And then in the middle, you have the midwit who's like trying to biohack your energetics. And
at 4:36 a.m., I plunge into a bath of 38 degrees for 30 seconds, and I alternate that with red light sauna. And then shortly after that, I drink exactly 32 ounces of water, no more, no less. It's like
that person is working way harder than they need to.
You're missing the major things. You're majoring in the minor things, and you're taking them way too seriously.
You probably need to get a life. Sorry. Yeah. I said it.
Said what you said. Meant what you meant. Did what you did.
So sugar diet. Anything else?
No, I think that's a fun one.
That wraps it up.
I think the actionable dietitian in me just says, hey, can we use this science as evidence that carbohydrates are not the spawn of Satan? They are not killing you. They are not inherently good or bad. They are energy, and how you choose to balance your energy systems is a whole different conversation. So this is fun, useful, nerdy information, but not an all call to start pounding nerd ropes and calling it diet, calling it nutrition.
Disclaimer, we are not sponsored by Big Carb.
We are not by Big Carb.
But we do like them.
We are not sponsored by Big Carb. I like that.
This is like the latest social media craze that I wanted to talk about, and it is fridge-scaping.
Yeah, I hadn't heard the term. I know what it is, and I will note that I always just thought that this was my own refrigerator OCD, but you exposed me.
Fridge-scaping way before it was cool.
I was doing it way before it was cool. When I had roommates in college, I had specific areas of the fridge that were mine because everything has its place.
You were such a fun roommate, I'm sure.
Let's just say, I had to learn some things about living with other people. Only child, definitely had to figure some stuff out in college.
Shocking that the other college bros were not interested in your fridge-scape.
Yeah, they were not fascinated by how optimized my refrigerator stuff was. But you showed me there's levels of fridge-scaping that are far beyond my neurotic tendencies.
I feel like I remember this for the first time when I was watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, of course, and the way their fridge was so meticulously organized and beautified and systematized, and they had cute little containers for every single little thing that they had. Anyways, I guess I should define fridge-scaping. So this is a little bit where our generational divide starts to creep up.
Mm-hmm.
Is I am like young Gen Z millennial cusp, and you're
deep in the millennial heart.
We won't say.
I think I'm 5. I'm not sad. I'm 5 years older than you, right?
Something like that.
I'm cool. I'm hip.
You're cool. Anyways.
I'm a neat guy.
Who loves to fridge-scape. So fridge-scaping is basically, it's making your fridge aesthetic, and it's been a big social media craze because people are loving sharing their beautified fridge-scapes. But the reason I wanted to talk about this as a nutrition-related social media topic is because I actually love this idea. Now, does your fridge need to be perfectly aesthetic? Do you need, a bouquet of flowers and water in your fridge to make it look absolutely beautiful? Do you need things hanging on the side of your fridge for beautification? Probably not. But what I do like about it, if
it makes you happy.
If it makes you happy, by all means. But I love thinking about your fridge practically. We talked about environment design a few times on this podcast. Environment design just meaning setting up your environment for success. So one environment that you have some control over most likely is your fridge, right?
Yeah.
So let's set up our fridge to make the healthier choices easier by maybe we're rinsing our berries and keeping them in a bowl, or maybe we are keeping the healthier stuff more front and center. The stuff that we're trying to eat more of, we're trying to keep that front and center so that we're more likely to reach for it, or making it in a more accessible container and maybe even a more aesthetic container because it makes it more fun. So I personally am here for fridge-scaping. I love it. What are your thoughts?
It makes me think of that one meme where it's like the frozen to death frog stuffed animal, and the caption is like, my broccoli looking at me pulling out my ice cream container at 11:30. But you're absolutely right. There's a heuristic called WASADI. It's by David Kahneman, and it stands for what you see is all there is. And it's meant to explore the bias that is our limitation based on our life experience. But that is something that actually, outside of that broader scope, has a zoomed in version, which would be a proximity bias, which is to say, when you open your fridge, what you see is what your brain will attach to. When you open your pantries, what you see is what your brain will attach. So when we recognize that if the only vegetables that exist are deep in the freezer and you don't open the freezer daily, you're probably not going to eat vegetables. There's a fair correlation there. If the vegetables are in the vegetable drawer, but they're required to be rinsed, cut, prepared, there are too many steps. And so, of course, you're going to grab the thing that's in the package that you tear apart. So there's definitely some validity to the idea of, if you want to eat more fruits and vegetables, the access of them, which means obtaining them from the grocery store with regularity, preparing them and putting them in a place that is accessible to you, so that when you're in a hurry in the middle of your day, they actually are an option. If you are somebody listening to this, and there have been times where you've opened the fridge and your brains goes, oh, I should eat some fruits and veggies, I don't have time. that is something that needed to be done ahead of time. And that is, we hear, especially in our fast-paced convenience society, why we eat a lot of packaged foods. It's really just the convenience of it. People don't want to take those next steps. So what I'll notice, if you're not willing to, maybe you need to pay a little bit of extra if you can to do the pre-prepared stuff. You can have the pre-chopped vegetables to the tune of an extra $1. You can have those types of things that help. But yes, if you can make it so that the simplest example I'll give, this is one that I've realized for me that works. I typically buy pineapple, blueberries, raspberries every week. And if they all sit in their individual containers in the produce drawer, they get eaten much less than if when I get home, I rinse them and I put them in a container together. And they get eaten even more if I then, after I've rinsed them and mixed them, I put them into 5 containers. So those 3 versions, the fruit that is in my fridge versus the fruit that is in a big container in my fridge versus the fruit that is in 5 containers in my fridge, increases my consumption from once a week to maybe twice a week to literally 5 times a week.
Yeah. You can do this with your kids too, encouraging your kids by and I'll talk to parents and kids together about this, especially the teens, because they're going so quickly in the morning. They're just like grabbing something out of the fridge and going. So what is the easiest thing to grab? Think about that. We're trying to decrease friction with the habits that you're trying to build and increase friction with the things that you're trying to avoid. So it makes sense to me. But here we have it, the original fridge scaper.
Yeah. Do you want to know one of my toxic traits?
Always.
If I'm at a friend's house and I have to go into their fridge for any reason to get something out, when I put it back, it's really hard for me not to organize a little bit, because people just put stuff in their fridge like anarchists. It's just you open the fridge and it's just everything all over the place. The cilantro next to the milk, next to the butter. I'm like, there's a flow to this. And I'm old enough to realize that that's very much a me problem, but
you must get invited to a lot of dinner parties.
I do, but it's because I resist the urge. If I did that, I probably wouldn't anymore. I'm learning my edges.
Oh my gosh. Well, there we have it, fridgescaping. It's a yes from both of us.
I would agree.
Take it.
I think it's worth taking time to, you said it well, optimize your fridge situation, set it up so the things you want to be eating every day are as easy to grab as possible. Totally. And there are so many ways that as dietitians, we are the troubleshooter, right? Everyone always says, I know what to do. I just need to do it. Dietitians aren't here to tell you what to do. We're here to help you navigate how to do it. These are examples of the how. In real time. It's okay, your goal is to eat more produce, but we find that the produce you buy is in the freezer, and so it's 3 steps away from your plate instead of the Kind bar in the pantry. So why do we think you're choosing the Kind bar? That's why. How do we get it closer to you? And there's a bunch of ways to do that. It doesn't just have to be chopping, prepping, and refrigerating. There are portable options. The list goes on and on. I won't fractal down that stream, but that is just a note of what we do very well is we help people navigate food so that it's more accessible, and as a result, it increases their consistency of consumption.
Totally. It's why I prep a quinoa salad and keep it in the fridge so I can just yank it out come lunchtime and add a protein to it, and there you are. We're ready to go.
Yeah.
Love it. Cool. Fridgescaping. And if you want to share your fridgescapes with us, please do. Share on Instagram, tag us. I want to see everyone's fridgescapes.
Yeah, we can definitely have a story of just fridgescapes.
Now I want to go home and fridgescape. There goes the rest of the day.
My fridgescape is always fridgescaped, but it's a little empty lately.
Will you post a picture of your fridge later today?
I'll think about it. I don't know if I want the world to see that part of me yet.
We're supposed to be vulnerable here. That's what we do.
I'll think about it.
All right. I'll remind you later.
I'm going to get a text message. Fridgescape, please.
Okay, next. This is yours.
Uh-oh.
Client story.
Ooh.
Client story. You mentioned a client that you kind of were helping detach with the scale and reattach with their habits. So tell us about this person.
You know what's funny? The reason this came up is because when I content create for Instagram, this has been a concept that I've been wanting to scream from the rooftops on Instagram in a 30, 60, 90 second segment. Mm-hmm. And I've realized that the reason I was resisting it. So for me, what happens is when I map out what I want to post, an idea like this is one that I know I want to post it, but if I keep moving it, if I keep deferring it, right, the Eisenhower grid of, am I going to do it? Am I going to delegate? Am I going to defer it? Or am I going to ditch it? If I keep deferring it, that means that it's not fitting for some reason.
Mm.
And what I realized the other week was that the reason it wasn't fitting is because it was worthy of a longer segment, not a shorter. And so that's what's fun as we come up with ideas and content. I've got my little one-liners, I've got my 30, 60, 90s. But if I want something to go for more than 3 minutes, I need to do it here. And this is one of those. So this is a client that really benefited from the concept, which is really what I want to highlight. The concept of weighing your habits, not the scale. So instead of weighing your body, weighing your habits. And so a lot of times what we try and help people focus on, because lifestyle is a perpetual thing. It's an infinite game. Yes, you want to lose the quick 10 pounds and you want to do it in 10 weeks. Great. But then what? You want to stay healthier, which means the things you did to get there need to stay so you can stay there. So our job isn't to get people to lose weight. It's to help people live like the healthier version of themselves. And if they're living like the healthier versions of themselves, a lot of people will lose some body fat. A lot of people will put on some muscle. It becomes a muscle up, fat down equation that, yes, on the scale over time, over a long enough time horizon, will create net weight loss. But to say that the goal is weight loss is to really misunderstand the game that's being played. And to constantly weigh yourself is an approval-seeking mechanism.
Yes.
Did I do good? It's a way to get a sticker.
Yeah. And eventually, let's say you hit that goal. Where's the approval now?
Where's the sticker? Say you were 400 pounds and now you're at a healthy body weight at 240 pounds for you. That 160 pounds where you were just collecting stickers based on progress, you now need to convert that dopamine high in your brain to something as boring as maintaining. So if you didn't become attached to the things that got you there, you can't celebrate the reason you're staying there. And so it's chess. We're playing a game of chess with people, and weight loss and scale staring is a game of checkers, but it's also more rooted in that need for instant gratification. It's the did I do good? Did I do good? Did I do good? The other problem with it is that's assuming that the scale is an accurate way to reflect your effort, knowing that, let's just say someone has 40% body fat, which is high for really anyone. We'd want to see the body composition change in that example. That means they're 60% not fat. And that 60% is going to have 60% of the scale fluctuation. So even if that person is losing body fat, they're water up, water down, glycogen stores in the muscle, water retention based on a female's infradian rhythm or a man's circadian rhythm with sleep and stress and digestive scenarios. Did you have a higher protein meal that digested slower? There are so many things that change the scale on a day-to-day basis. The average person's weight is not a set number. It's a 3 to 5 pound range from fed to dehydrated. And so we have to recognize that if you are living like the healthier you, and we know that those habits are going to create a lighter, leaner you over time, even in that perfect reality where your inputs are flawless, the scale is not going to go down in a linear fashion. It's going to be a scatter plot at best that over a 4-week span may not show a great trend line. Over an 8-week span will start to show a trend line. Over a 6-month span will show a dominant trend line. So when people say they lost a pound a week, they didn't mean that every week they stepped on the scale and lost a pound. They mean 6 months later, they're down 25 pounds. And that is a very bumpy journey. And so if you don't understand those things, you're setting yourself up to be disappointed. But more importantly, even if you do understand those things, why the hell would you let yourself get distracted and subjected to that? And the answer is an attempt at accountability. Weighing in weekly is an accountability measure. That's really what it's trying to do. And I understand that. Wanting to feel connected over a time horizon. Every week, I'm going to weigh in and see how I did. Well, here's the funny part. There's a way better way to weigh in and see how you did, which is on Saturday morning when you would go to step on the scale to get your sticker for the week, or see that you're up 1.2 pounds because you went out the night before and had some food with friends. And even though you lost body fat, the scale doesn't show it. And now you feel defeated and demoralized and you spend your weekend all pissed off.
And then you quit.
I hope you can hear that spiral makes no damn sense, right? What if you sat down and journaled and reflected on the effectiveness of your inputs? How well did you move this week? How well did you take care of you? How well did you prepare your foods? How well did you plan your foods? How well did you manage your social things? How well did you enjoy your social things? If you took that time and actually reflected on your inputs, 2 things take place. 1, you would have a good feel as to whether or not it was a successful week.
Yeah.
So we'd have a pretty good predictive answer of the question, did I live in a way that changed my body? We'd be able to answer that question fairly confidently. But more importantly, we would also have the answer to the question, what do I do to make it better?
Mm-hmm.
When you step on the scale and it didn't do what you wanted, it could be as simple as, oh, you should have weighed another day because you're 3 days before your period. That's useless information. Meanwhile, you're dropping your calories by 200 and adding 2,000 steps a day. So you're manipulating lifestyle things that have nothing to do with why the scale changed.
Mm-hmm.
Where if we're reflecting going, this week I was kind of shooting from the hip all week because I got home from a trip on Monday night. I didn't get groceries until Wednesday and I didn't have time to cook. And so I really ate out and kind of grabbed what I could.
Mm-hmm.
This week, I'm going to use this weekend to reset. I'm going to fridge scape and get my fridge back to where I need it to be. Oh, and also when I go out to eat, I usually am aware I'm going out ahead of time. So I need to start thinking about that and planning that. So instead of just showing up and saying what sounds good, I'm going to think about it as a part of my day instead of just some spontaneous thing. So journaling reveals your path forward. Yep. Oh, I didn't make enough time for movement this week. I want to get up, but I keep not getting up. And then you get to sit and talk to your dietitian and reflect, okay, I want to work out first thing in the morning, but I keep hitting snooze instead. And we go, okay, well, your morning routine is likely tied to an evening routine. So if your evening routine is out of whack, your morning routine is going to be out of whack. So then we get to troubleshoot the bookends and figure out what we could do to better set you up to increase the likelihood that you exercise. Mm-hmm. We may be able to reset expectations where it's, oh, I need to do it every day. And frankly, your brain just isn't ready to accept the demand of 4 a.m. 5 days a week. And so we start with 4 a.m. 2 days a week and an evening walk, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's ways to troubleshoot this, how to get better. But how to get better is only clear if you're aware of what you're doing in the first place.
Exactly.
So I did this with a client. I've done this with a lot of clients, I'll be honest. But what triggered this was a client that did this recently with me, where they finally agreed with me, because I've been beating them to death with inputs over outcomes. And every time the scale doesn't do what they want, I'm posing that maybe the scale isn't the best measure of their success because they're trending and their body is doing the thing, but they're too zoomed in. And
they always feel like a failure. I have so many folks like this.
Yes, it sounds relatable, right? It's almost like this has happened thousands of times in our careers collectively. And so I finally had someone recently who, after literally a year of having this conversation, noting that over that year they've lost weight. So it's not like they've made no progress. They've been progressing. But to your point, they can't feel it or see it, and it's not fast enough because they're staring at the outcome, not the inputs. And when I look at them, I start hearing, this is the other trigger for it. I feel like I'm wasting your time. I bet like I'm your toughest client. They start to have that type of internal story. People don't realize that our job isn't a weight loss coach that expects people to come in, hold their breath, and drop a bunch of weight to make us feel successful. Our role is to challenge people to live like the healthier them, and then walk them through and work them through the nuances of what that means. Navigating relationships, navigating relationship with self, navigating their environment, like changing their relationship with food. This shit takes years. It just does. And so after a year of making progress but not seeing it because they're coming from an outcome-based lens, and when you come from an outcome-based lens, you're always insatiable. It's never enough. It's never fast enough. It's never good enough.
Race to the bottom.
Versus being in an input-based lens. And what's hilarious is anyone that knows me personally typically thinks of me as a successful person. And I will say that the reason is because I'm not an outcome-focused person. I'm an input-focused person. Every day, I don't stare at my finish line. Every day, I stare at the foot that's in front of me. What can I do to get better? What can I do to get better? What can I do to get better? And over a long enough time horizon, that's a checkmate game. I will win.
The outputs speak for themselves. You don't have to be tracking them.
They're a lag time indicator. They will happen. It's inevitable. But people are so rooted in that fear and they want the guarantee that they're missing the point of the game, which is the guarantee isn't the scale going down. The guarantee is you feeling better day over day over day over day. Live that way 100 days, you're going to feel 100 days better. And so if we can orient people towards inputs instead of outcomes, we make them literally invincible and they will be successful. And my most successful clients, whether it's in actual patient population, whether it's in those that I mentor professionally, or whether it's like in people that I mentor as a business or life person, all of my most successful people, this is the core thing I've helped them achieve. I'll pose it. I'll lead the horse to water, but they choose to drink, which is to say, hey, instead of obsessing over the outcome day in and day out, I'm going to get obsessed with my inputs. I'm going to commit to learning to navigate my environment, figure out a way to move my body in a meaningful way with consistency. I'm going to troubleshoot that. And then I'm going to figure out a way to fuel and nourish my body in a meaningful way, given all of my circumstances and obstacles. I'm going to identify the obstacles and I'm going to adapt and troubleshoot until I find things that fit. And over time, these habits are going to be me living like the healthier, happier me. And that is going to show up physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Yeah. And so my challenge is to say, I had a client recently that after a year of nudging, they finally took the leap with me. This was actually 2 months ago now, because I've been deferring this post for a little while. 2 months ago, had their first month where they did weekly subjective journal weigh-ins, right? So they weighed their habits instead of their body. And the smile on their face in the first session, a month after they did it, we sat down and they weren't upset, frustrated, pissed off. They didn't have any sort of negative. There was no urgency. There was no, it should be faster, or I don't think I'm making it. There was no negative, there was none of that. Instead, it was, they could clearly see the progress they were making week over week in terms of getting better at their habits. They all of a sudden, this is one of my favorite things, they drove the conversation. Wow. So instead of them coming into session and saying, I don't understand what's happening, it's not working. And then I'm like, well, no, it is. It's just not working as fast as you'd like because you're too busy staring at the finish line. And that's creating urgency in you that's not rooted in reality. Like as you know, I'm a very loving and caring person, but I'm blunt AF. Like, I'm going to say the thing. Like, that's just how it is. And love it or hate it, I'm going to say the thing.
I know this.
So it's to say, instead of that energy, they came in and they were driving the conversation, which was, yeah, I noticed in the first week, I wasn't able to get as many workouts in. The kids had just gotten out of school, blah, 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 blah. But I was able to adjust my routine. So I was able to get my workouts in the evening a couple days instead of the morning because of shifts in schedule. And I'm hearing this person tell me how they're living to protect themselves. Guess who just won the game? They did. Yeah. That's the game. And so it was so cool. It was one of those moments where I watched this person who had been in this vicious circle, victim spiral about, I've only lost X pounds in period of time, and I'm nudging them and holding space for them, which is the side note, my favorite part of our job. Like, most people don't recognize that that's actually what we do, is we hold space for people to shift their mindset to the correct mindset. And it can take a year or two. Like, that's not a slow journey. That's not a fast journey. It's a slow journey. But to watch them sit down after the first month of weighing their interventions or their habits and reflecting and watching them like a freaking Roomba self-clean and self-manicure, bouncing back, being more resilient, figuring out, oh, I better get to the grocery store on this day, making the adjustments, time managing. All of a sudden, I watched this person and I just looked at him. I went, congrats on driving.
Yeah,
like that
they're
entire
owning their
follow-up.
time, and their habits.
It was so cool to see.
That's so cool.
So
I
it lit
love
me
that.
up, and I journaled it that day as like, oh, I need to post about this and rave. And then I kept pushing it. And like I said, it's because this was worthy of a 10-minute segment, not a 30-second shout out.
I love that. It's a great example of like, it's, so I think why we get into this is like, we love the mindset element of things because it's so widely applicable, like looking at lead measures versus lag measures. You should look at both. But the frequency with which you look at both is different. And
the meaning you assign them.
Exactly.
And what you do with that information. It's no different than the carb craze thing. Yeah. Right? Like, is it interesting? Yes. Is it true from a metabolic perspective? Yes. But how is it relevant? Like, now what? What are you going to do about it? Totally. You start to realize where if you're only staring at the outcomes, I didn't get the thing. Now what? Yeah. Are you going to give up because you didn't get the thing? Are you going to do the same thing over again and hope to get the same result, which a very intelligent person said was insanity a long, long time ago? Are you going to change the things you're doing to see if you can get the thing? And so now you go, oh, I should change what I'm doing to see if I can get the thing. Yeah. And then you go, okay, how should you change what you're doing? Going back to what we were saying before, in this instance, what if the reason that you're not getting the thing is because the thing you're looking for isn't measured by what you're doing? The scale in this case, right? The scale didn't go down. I need to change something. And it's like, that could be that you need to change your eating and moving. Yeah. That could also be that you need to not weigh yourself 3 days before your menstrual cycle. Yeah.
That would be like a business completely altering their marketing strategy on a week by week basis based on results, right? Like you need to give it more time.
Yeah. We post one video and it doesn't go viral and we go, well, we've got to completely gut this campaign. Shit takes time.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because when you realize if you're going to be outcome focused and the outcomes are not coming, you then have to enter the phase of diagnosing, which means you need to reflect on the inputs to change the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But if you haven't been reflecting on the inputs, then you're not actually going to know how to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So if instead, what if, crazy idea, your game was just reflecting on the inputs?
Wow.
That's the game. Now you're just, every week you have divine clarity of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then we can have a conversation about objectively, what is that doing for you? And subjectively, what is that doing for you?
Mm-hmm.
And then how is it fitting? How does it need to sway given your life and your chaos and your flavor of vigor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's so many things around it that we can investigate the nuance, but even if you're going to stare at the outcome, understanding the inputs is the only way to change the outcome.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not a choice. You have to do it. You can either choose to do it reactively and from a place of emotion, or you can choose to do it proactively from a place of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is guaranteed to outpace the other.
Mm-hmm.
Enough said, full stop. Like that's it. Mic drop.
It's, I love that story. I love that story because I think I'm just going to paint a wide brush really quick and say, I think it's so important with anyone we're working with that they have a way of tracking their inputs. And I have told all of my clients that, and I frankly don't care how they do it. Some of my clients are like my FitnessPal junkies, and they like love tracking their calories. They want to make sure they hit their calories and protein and fiber. And I'm like, fantastic. If that is what you want to look at, fantastic. And that might only work for a season of life, but like nonetheless, it is a way to track inputs rather than outputs. And then it could be as simple as just writing an X on your calendar, your paper calendar, every time you exercise or hit a certain number of steps or whatever it is that is your goal. Like, I think a lot of my clients can sometimes be initially like anti-tracking things because they associate tracking with, oh, I have to track every single thing that I eat and all the calories and things like that. And it's like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about finding a way, whatever way works for you, of tracking your inputs. I think it is so crucial because how can you determine whether or not you are entitled to the outcomes you're seeking if you have no way of tracking the effort you're putting into it?
Yes, that's perfectly said. You start to realize tracking is an awareness campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to better understand your behaviors so that you can better understand how they're affecting you, some type of awareness campaign is necessary. And whether it's a caloric awareness campaign, that's useful if becoming aware of energy is the goal of the campaign, right? If you're having more of a time management problem, it may be more of like a captain's log.
Mm-hmm.
Day of the week, time of day, what's happening, right? It may be some sort of journaling activity. One of my favorite ones is my Lifestyle 180 that I built, which is you pick the 6 things in life that you want to do every day. It can be reading 10 pages of a book. It can be walking your dog. It can be drinking a certain amount of fluid or prioritizing protein and produce at every meal. You'd pick 6 things and then you give yourself a check mark for each one. 6 things times 30 days is 180 actions that you did in the name of self-care. And that is the Lifestyle 180. These are all the same concept. They're an awareness campaign that's meant to help you focus on something. If you're focusing on it just to focus on it and you're not learning from it, then it's a waste of your time. So if the person that comes into my office and is like, I've tracked 1,000 days and I can tell you nothing about it. It's like, well, that is a unnecessary habit. Now, can we connect that to something and make it useful? Potentially. Or we may find that there's a better way to track. So I'm all for, to your point, awareness campaigns, especially if they're perceived, if they're coming from a place of curiosity. That's the people that tracking creates massive anxiety and is triggering them. That doesn't mean eventually there isn't an awareness campaign they should be a part of, but their initial awareness campaign should be why they're so triggered by it. So that's where we need to dig into the psychology there alongside a professional in that world to go, okay, why is this being perceived as pressure? Why is there fear of this? Or why are you triggered by this? What are the stories and narratives that are associated with this? Like, that is its own awareness campaign. That same person 2 years later may be able to revisit the idea of awareness of habits coming from a place of curiosity, not criticism. And we did an episode on it called Evolution of Awareness in season 1. And that's what this was rooted in, is it is not bad to be aware of self, but you need to understand what you're looking for, what you want to learn, and why you want to be aware of it, and then move forward.
Totally. And I think it's only fair to the coach, the dietitian that's trying to help you, that you're tracking your inputs, because otherwise if you come in and you're frustrated that you're not seeing the results that you're hoping for, I have no way of knowing, is it because the intervention is truly not working and we need to adjust? Is it that the intervention is too hard to stick to for whatever reason and we need to change our approach or, change something else to make it more doable? Or is it something else? You know what I mean? Like it could be such a variety of things, but it's impossible for me to know how to adjust course unless I know whether or not we're actually doing the things or not. Yeah. So
I love that. And those are some of the things that dietitians get to do in the weeds. We get to help people navigate how, which means a lot of times we're prescribing some sort of awareness campaign that's more targeted to the stage they're in and what they need to learn. And sometimes that is a psychological self-reflection. Sometimes that is an awareness of timing and patterning. Sometimes it's an awareness of consistency. One of my favorites is the person that's like, yeah, I eat the same thing every day. And it's like 7 days a week. Really? I call bullshit. Like that
unless
shows,
you're Rob Marty. Shout
out to our COO Rob, who actually does. But it is to say that most people that is not true for, and that's also not a bad thing. But we can hear where there's a misalignment of their reality that is preventing them from progressing. Yes. So it's after I wrote food down for a week, I realized like I eat more like 2 meals on the weekends. It's more of like a brunch and dinner. And then I eat my like breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner during the week. But then on Thursdays, I have this, and this. And so it tends to be this. And it's cool. So you have a bunch of days that are fairly consistent. Then you have weekends that are clustered and a bit unique. And then you have an exception day that is its own thing. None of those things are wrong. The goal isn't to make them all uniform and look the same. The goal is to understand that that is your pattern variance and then lean into that variance. Yeah. And so it's awareness. It's what you do with it, right? Are we coming from a place of curiosity? Are we using it to troubleshoot and optimize? Are we using it to identify things that we didn't realize, finding those aha moments? Yeah. It's one of my favorite things to do with people. But ultimately, it all comes back to the idea that if you spent more time weighing your inputs than your outcomes, you would be a happier human. You would be a more self-directed human. You would be much clearer in who you are, what you're doing, and where you're going. And you're going to be a more effective and eventually successful human. And I'm talking about nutrition, but this also isn't just about nutrition.
There's a quote in the Bhagavad Gita that I always reference with my clients, and it's a summary. I'm summarizing it, but the nature of it is like you're entitled to the inputs, but not to the outcomes. And I love that because that's a hard pill to swallow because we're doing the thing for the outcome. So what do you mean I can't look at the outcomes? Or what do you mean I'm not entitled to it? I'm putting in all this work, but it's so true. Like it's even again in business, it might be like a variable return. It's not like you can guarantee if you do this, you'll get Y. Right? You know this better than anyone else.
Oh my gosh, this year Case is going to have payroll north of 2 million. So like that money's coming out of my account no matter what I do. Does that guarantee me to have a house and a boat and a Maserati? Hell no. Just as likely I go bankrupt, to be honest. What's the factor or variable in that thing? Me and the team that I bring on. Right? So like you said, it's what's funny though is when you think about, there's 2 ways you can think about what you just said. You have control over the inputs, but not the outcome. Will drive a lot of people to say, why bother? And my question would be, why not? What's the alternative? Yeah. Right? To not try is to literally sit on the bench and guarantee the failure. To try is literally the only option. And guess what? It's the only option that gives you the variable of you. And personally, maybe I'm a bit confident in self. If I'm on the team, I think that team has a better chance of winning at whatever it is. And it's because I'm passionate as hell. I'm gritty. I'm going to get after it. So it becomes that game of, I'm going to try really hard. Is it possible that I'm going to fail? You bet your ass. I've failed plenty in my life. Guess what all those were? They weren't losses. They were lessons. I'm better now because of them in literally every way. And guess who's now wiser and better? The team we currently have. Yeah. I didn't hire everybody perfectly right out of the gates. I didn't lead anywhere. I didn't even lead initially when I hired, right? Like all of the things we've been doing over this last 10 years has been a game of why not? And I think that that's something that we should all be applying to our self and health, which is if you're somebody out there listening, we'll translate this back to nutrition. I'm only going to do these things. I'm only going to take care of my body, nourish myself, prioritize my self-care, move my body, challenge my physiology. If I get a specific outcome of the scale going down in an organized fashion at a certain cadence over time. If that is your non-negotiable contract, you're going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
You have to come to terms with the fact that you need to be willing to do everything you just said, regardless of outcome, because what you just said is worth doing, period. Me helping people is my vision. I'm on an impact mission, right? The reason that Case is growing, the reason that I'm trying to get better at hiring, the reason I'm trying to become a better leader, the reason I'm encouraging you and our team to do things like build platforms like this so we can take a swing. That is all rooted in the fact that I want to make a difference. And so I'm either going to try and make a difference and do so, try and make a difference and make some difference, but not enough to sustain, or I'm not going to try at all and not going to make a difference. And so you start to realize like the effort is the win. Like the journey is what it's all about. If you prioritize self-care, you will be a healthier, happier person.
Yeah.
There will be a dozen different ways to measure that and see that. So I guarantee there will be outcomes, but it may not be the outcome that you specifically wanted and manifested.
Expect
and there's acceptance
on your
there.
timeline, right? That lack of certainty is really hard for people.
Yeah.
That's what makes our job kind of hard sometimes.
Yeah. No, it's convincing people that the inputs are worth it regardless, and that even though outcomes aren't guaranteed doesn't mean the inputs aren't worth it. And that is a hard thing to reconcile until you really think through it and go, what's the alternative? Well, like you can either try and maybe get it or not try and definitely not get it.
Yeah. My most successful clients, they may come in for something like weight loss, let's say, but a year or so into working together, they don't really care about the scale at all, but they are definitely healthier and happier.
Exactly. And that is a cool thing to emphasize, because that's what I always talk about with our team is a lot of people will come in with the goal of weight loss, and the goal of weight loss is a poorly translated thing to I want to be healthier, happier, and prouder of me. Typically, like if we're going to really try and like, what's the thing behind the thing? So I say that they want to climb this mountain of weight loss, but what we know is when they get to the top of that mountain, there's more mountains, and they're bigger and they're better and they have prettier views, which means they're going to want to climb those too. And so the people come in initially with the weight loss. They then realize that there's more to this story than just number go down, me equals me good, right? Like that transaction ain't it. And so then we work with them on unpacking all the nuances that go into that input outcome. And then to your point, over time, the outcome becomes clearer and it changes and it evolves. It becomes stronger, it becomes, more tied to self, becomes more reflective of who they are and what they're about. And oh my gosh, is that a powerful statement? So it's like, hey, if you commit to this, I guarantee there will be outcomes and I guarantee they will be worth it.
Wow.
Here's a fun thing to think about. I'll go back to a business example just because it's more relevant. I go bankrupt next year.
Please no.
Probably not. Yeah, right. Hypothetical. Big hypothetical. Was the 12 years worth it?
Absolutely.
Not even a question, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not even a question. Was it a complete waste of my time? No.
If you were defining it only on the success of this one specific endeavor, then
that's no different than saying the scale is the only thing that will tell me whether I did good or not. Especially, it's so funny when you get the people that are like, I've been lifting really heavy and getting super strong in the gym, and I've been eating more protein to prioritize my recovery, and I'm sleeping better and I'm hydrating better, and my back pain's gone away. I move so much better. I'm playing with my kids and chasing them around, but the scale hasn't changed. So I'm going to stop doing all of that. It's like, what did you just say? Did you just say
get out
10? Yeah, exactly. Go think about what you just said. But actually do that in this office, because this is where we're supposed to be talking about that. But it's like that's actually what happens is you cite 10 reasons why this is super worth doing, and they're the actual reasons to do it. And then because the one initial reason isn't quite landing or meeting your expectations, you give up on the whole thing. Yep. And again, what I just said about the bankruptcy is a very polarizing example, but sometimes we need to live in the extremes to understand that the consequence of not trying is the only consequence. Yeah. There is no consequence of trying. Like, you will get positive outcomes. They may not be to the degree of delusional excitement and optimism you had, but you will have good outcomes. And that's where the most extreme example I can give is I'm homeless and under a bridge in a year. Am I a better person for the journey? And the answer is unequivocally yes. I have tools in my toolbox that means give me 6 months and that bridge, there's going to be some really cool boxes.
You're going to own the bridge.
I'm going to own the bridge. I'm going to be the toll booth troll. Anyway, we digress. But yes,
I love that.
I love inputs over outcomes in every way. But anybody listening that we can take this to the nutrition front, make sure you're weighing your habits more than yourself, because the moment you're weighing yourself and it's not doing what you think it's supposed to do, we need to better understand that so we can decide if it actually warrants habit intervention or if it's just your misunderstanding of the tool you're using, aka the scale in this case. Let's get back to the habits, because that's the answer. It's always the answer.
Yeah, the non-scale wins. I like it.
Well
Good.
said.
All right, well, that took longer than I thought, but that was really fun. I could talk about this stuff all day.
Yeah, we definitely sidebarred and fractaled, but that's worthwhile.
Scream from the rooftops.
Yes.
We were talking about, is there a difference between being anti-medicine or anti-med first? Specifically for like chronic disease management.
Yeah, this is another one that I'll take credit for this one. This is actually another one that's been in my content bucket that I've been punting for more than 2 months. This one's been maybe a 6-month punt. That's why I'm so excited about this platform, is I'm realizing our buckets. And so this one is I had a conversation about this with a physician, and then I've had to have this conversation a lot with clients that are taking GLP-1s in particular.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of meds that come into this, but the statement is, as a dietitian, as a lifestyle practitioner, there is a weird perception that we are anti-med.
Yep.
Like the perfect example, you've probably heard a client say this. Have you had someone come into your office to tell you they started a GLP-1, but they're embarrassed and they say like, you're probably going to kill me, but...
The sheepish looks.
Yeah.
Like,
or the like, I know you're probably going to kill me, but like, I wanted to ask about this. And what's hilarious is the dynamic that you have with this patient. You're a very open-minded person, so they shouldn't feel that way. But it's that perception of, one, they're kind of frowned upon. So let's dig into that. But also there's a perception that as a lifestyle practitioner, we are anti-meds. And because GLP-1s are so aligned and so much overlap in the chronic disease world that we work in, there's this perception of it's like us versus them. And so I want to say this so that every doctor and every practitioner and every patient can hear this. I am not anti-medicine. I am anti-medicine as first line of treatment in non-acute circumstances. So let's unpack that. So non-acute circumstances. When am I med first? Acute circumstances. If your leg fell off, I'm not going to say, we should give you some spinach to increase your vitamin K for clotting. Right? Probably a bit of an underemphasized intervention at that point. Maybe we use medicine to provide clotting. Maybe we do the things. So there are absolutely times in acute care when things are urgent, life-threatening, all of that, where medicines are literally the initial solution. They are what we'd call the Band-Aid, or they're the thing that can stop the hemorrhaging. And sometimes that hemorrhaging is quite literal. So again, I'm not the holistic person that's like, oh, if you're having a stroke, you should definitely use white willow bark extract instead of aspirin because it's more natural. It's
cleanse
like, you
your
better
chakras.
Yeah, you better pop that Bayer real quick and get to the ER and talk to some people that know some shit about strokes.
Yeah.
Like, so let me be clear. I'm not anti-med first ever. I am anti-med first in behavioral and chronic issues. So if you are someone that is dealing with high cholesterol, if you are someone who is dealing with high blood pressure, non-acute, chronic, note the difference there, right? If you are someone that is dealing with excess body fat, diagnosed as obesity, and it is creating downstream consequences, if you are somebody who is dealing with diabetes or some degree of insulin resistance, and the list can go on, but we'll use those as this conversation. I am behavior first, med second. And the reason is because the med will never fix the root problem, noting that the root problem is likely dominantly lifestyle based.
Yeah.
There are absolutely examples and exceptions where you go and have someone who's optimizing all the lifestyle things, and then because of genetics and other factors, these things still take place. Great. Sounds like a good time to add some meds. But to say that meds should be first is absolutely incorrect. In the GLP-1 world, to do the med first is to treat the medicine like the bowling ball, which means it's the main intervention that knocks over the pins. That means you will have to be on that med forever.
Mhm.
If you stop taking it, the bowling ball is gone and you don't have any habits that you've practiced.
Mhm.
And so I think too often, and it's largely, honestly, if we're going to zoom out for a second, it's why case specific's doing what it's doing. Our society, our medical intervention is reactive care. We don't have a lot of proactive care that's coordinated yet.
Yep.
Case specific is attempting to be a reliable, consistent source. That means people can go to a proactive place and do proactive things as a baseline,
Mhm.
and then go do reactive things when they need to do reactive things. But because step one is PCP and the PCP is a quarterback of a reactive model, that means that meds first is going to be the natural thing, because that's
Yeah.
the service that they're going to get.
Yeah, that's what they have time for, and it's also what they are more specialized in than we are.
It's what they are. They are students of medicine. Their job is, you are presenting with a problem and their solutions are medicine.
Yeah.
That is not a criticism. That is
Yeah.
what that system is. Let me emphasize, that system is very necessary, but it is not the first step for about 80% of the people that utilize it regularly.
Yeah.
Most people would benefit from prioritizing health habits. And so whether we're zooming into the GLP-1s and saying, hey, do you think it's a good idea that I take this? It depends. Are you committed to prioritizing changing your relationship with food? Are you willing to do the deep work and recognize whether it's the emotional relationship with food, or actually just prioritizing it enough to self-care and meal plan and meal prepare and navigate your environment? Are you willing to change your movement? The version of you that eats differently and moves differently is going to live differently.
Mhm.
If we're then saying a medication is going to help modify hormones to let you do those things better, and then get a good rhythm of them going, and then allow those to pass the baton and take over and be the only intervention, that's awesome. Or do you have some exceptional condition reality where the habits alone are not enough and we need a medication to support?
Mhm.
All for that. But you hear that is a habit first, med second, because so many people, if they did habits first and really did that work, we wouldn't need the meds in the first place.
Mhm.
And the comment is, the med on its own doesn't give us the same outcome. The person that lives like the lighter, healthier, happier them, by moving their body more and exercising, resistance training, getting more active and engaged in things, prioritizing food and navigating food in a different way, is going to have more muscle mass, is going to have a lower risk of fall, is going to have a lower cancer risk, is going to have a list of benefits that come from it.
Mhm.
Where the person that only takes the medication, especially in the GLP-1 state, where they are just basically medically starving themselves and they're having massive muscle protein breakdown and fat loss and water loss, but just losing a whole bunch of weight, they don't walk away. They walk away lighter, but healthier is probably healthier than what they were, but definitely not as healthy as they could be, and definitely not where we intended them to be.
Absolutely.
So, and we see this time and time again, is a diabetic medication can help manage blood sugar by squeezing the life out of the pancreas until it dies, and then replacing the pancreas. But at the end of the day, that's only going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. You're going to need more and more medications to chase that. You're not actually being healthier. You're actually deferring things and delaying things. And so I think a lot of people don't realize that the medicine isn't fixing the problem. It's just delaying the problem a lot of the time, which, again, in acute circumstances, delaying the problem is the literal goal. You're buying time to survive. Please do that.
Yeah,
always.
Absolutely.
But the med only makes sense in chronic things when we're doing the other things that can actually create the symptom relief.
Absolutely.
And so I'm not anti-med. I'm actually very pro-medicine. I'm so grateful for it, and it's obviously a big piece of who we are and what we do. But I am anti-med first, and I'm anti-med only when it pertains to chronic issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, I think of us as like complementary medicine as opposed to alternative medicine.
Beautifully said. Wow, I love that.
Have some clients that come in with, let's say, they're very frustrated by the medical system, which I completely understand in this reactive model, and physicians aren't given the resources that they need to give proper care in this model. And they feel very frustrated. They feel very dismissed. Let's say maybe it's an autoimmune condition or an amalgamation of nondescript symptoms that they really can't wrap their heads around, and they feel like they're not getting support. And then they will turn to a dietitian thinking, you guys are like, you're the good guys. You guys, also hate the medical system, and you're going to help me do this the natural way. And sometimes it takes a little bit of educating, saying like, no, I want to work really closely with your team, but we're going to focus more on these diet and lifestyle things that you have more agency over. And we're also going to consult with rheumatology if it's an autoimmune thing, or endocrinology if we think it might be a hormonal thing. And, we'll help point them in the right direction. But we very much do want to work with the team because oftentimes we are so limited in our scope as well.
That's so well said. And we will maximize lifestyle and habits so that they can give you the most bang for your buck. There are a lot of people that maximizing that is the entire strategy. There are also a lot of people where maximizing that will not be enough and medical intervention needs to be prioritized.
And claiming to be able to do it all, just diet and lifestyle, I think is really unethical and can be unsafe.
I agree. That's the anti-med perception, where we're not doing this instead of medicine.
Right.
We're doing these things because you need to be doing these things, and you may not need medicine because you're doing these things, but there are plenty of people that will still need some medication. They'll need less, and less will likely work longer for longer, but it may still be valuable. A really good example is familial hypercholesterolemia.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I was literally thinking about that as we were talking about.
It popped up as you were talking. Is familial hypercholesterolemia is actually a genetic condition where your body makes too much cholesterol, for those listening. And so what's interesting about that one is they develop very thick blood, and it is purely genetic. Now, here's where we get to parse this out. To say that diet and lifestyle have no effect is incorrect. So this person may have naturally, if they're eating a traditional American diet, so like not well, right? They're eating poorly. Their cholesterol levels could be 600 and 700. If we maximize their eating with produce and protein and quality of food and all of that, we may be able to get their levels down to about 400. And the difference between 400 and 700 is a stroke risk differential that is significant. I won't even try and pretend I know the numbers, but it's massive. From there, we may add some exercise, a balance of cardiovascular stuff, in particular, because there tends to be a driver there with the HDL. And we may get it down another 50 to 70 points. And then from there, we may add a CoQ10 and a PQQ and red yeast rice and even perhaps, a resveratrol. And we may be able to drop it another 20, 30, 40, 50, depending on the patient's personal receptivity. So we may be able to take it's a genetic thing from a 700 to a lifestyle thing that's a 350. But it needs to be under 200. So without medication, you don't win this game without the med. Yeah. So if someone who has familial, they need a statin. But here's the comment. The person that just takes the statin, they have to take such a high dosage to go from 700 to 200 that the symptomology and side effects of that med is going to completely destroy their quality of life.
Absolutely. And that leads to,
less activity,
or being less adherent. And I don't even like to use the word adherent because
compliant, whatever it is, but exactly. And so you start to hear that's an example of one where you have no choice but to do both. If you really want quality of life over a sustained period of time, despite this reality, both are required. You will need some degree of medication and you will need a commitment to lifestyle. That is a very, very good example. And man, does that ripple across so many people. And especially in the wake of GLP-1s, there are too many people taking these meds as their only intervention, and then they're acting surprised when they get used to it, right? So the dose you're taking now in 2 years is not going to do what it currently does. So you start taking this med, it is a ticking time bomb to the point that it becomes flat and ineffective for you. I'm talking mostly to the people using it for the purpose of weight loss, not to the diabetics, because there seems to be an extended sensitivity for diabetics. But it is to say that in that example, you go, if you are not actively building the habits required to live like the healthier, happier, lighter version of you during the time you're on this med, that weight's coming back, and it's coming back in a way on the other side of a compromised metabolism and a really inferior physiologic reality. And so you are once again taking a shortcut that has consequences that are very predictable, and we can sit here and tell you they're happening. So there's just time and time again, it's like, hey, all for the medication conversation. There are plenty of people that it needs to be a part of the equation, but man, it shouldn't ever be the only part of the conversation in chronic disease. And it may need to be in some people, noting that, like you said, we can't guarantee that there's a no med reality for everybody, but that doesn't mean The difference between taking a microdose of something alongside healthy lifestyle versus taking max doses of 3 things to try and mimic lifestyle, the physiologic reality of those two people downstream, they have a very different quality and quantity of life.
Totally. Wow. Well said. Well
Yeah.
said.
Once again, that can't be a 30-second Instagram post, huh?
I'm so with you. So we're anti-med first for chronic disease, or never a pill without a skill.
Never a pill without a skill. That may be one of my favorite Devon the dietitianisms. Never a pill without a skill. Man, I love that one. Probably. I'm going to steal it from you if you don't. Shared IP agreements in your contract.
I think we got to go.
I got to think about some stuff.
Okay, last
but not least.
We, as always, wanted to touch on what's the latest in the Make America Healthy Again
is there a lot?
World. So one thing that you had brought up that I think is something that's worth talking about, because we're trying to focus more so just on the nutrition elements, the stuff that we actually are more so experts in. And I wanted to touch on the conversation around the dietary guidelines for Americans, and specifically like the harping on how terrible the food pyramid was.
Mm-hmm.
This has been very much in the social media sphere. It's been talked a lot by, people in Make America Healthy Again. I'm going to call it MAHA for short, just because it's a mouthful. But you were actually the one who brought up this idea as a concept. So share with me like what your take is on what's been said, what has been said, and what do you think?
Yeah, perfect. As I've promised, my goal with MAHA is to help people understand, basically zoom out and present an unbiased view, because MAHA is a part of a political movement, and that means that it will have political dialogue and discourse, and it will be saturated with political bias from both sides, and there will be a massive amount of content that is politically spun, which will make it very hard to understand what's actually taking place. And both sides of this piss me off to no avail, which is why I'm good to do this, because I'm not on a team in this, and I'm on team health and wellness and team America and team pro dialogue. I want to talk about it. And man, has there been some we'll call it some errors of omission and avoidance, as well as some just straight out like committed lies from both sides of this, trying to play the political tug of war. So I was hoping that we could set the record straight and maybe just like kind of get down to brass tacks, and I may point out where some of these biases exist, just so that hopefully we can navigate this with a clear mind and maybe get to a conclusion that actually makes sense. So to your point, a couple of the key things that have taken place is RFK was at a committee meeting, like one of the House committee meetings. It was like the energy subcommittee, and he announced their intention to basically, over the next 4 years, encourage the use of wearable devices as the main health intervention. And the comment was, we are going to do the largest marketing campaign in basically what we'll call health and human services history around wearables. So this then also led to criticisms of my pyramid, which is one of the points of contention we'll double back to. So there was a lot of, why are we doing this? Because my pyramid sucked. And you started to then see the downstream. What I ended up witnessing was the errors of omission in the MAHA presentation, which I want to point out. And then also the anti-MAHA side responding to this by pulling things out of context and oversimplifying and potentially even just like straight up like falsifying information. And we're led with, once again, this tribal versus scenario where we're not having the real conversation. So I'd like to come back to that, because ultimately where I want to focus is, as we talked about in the last episode, budget cuts are at a level above where we are. MAHA isn't cutting the budget. They are under a group that is cutting a budget, and the Make America Healthy Again movement with HHS and all of the subcommittees there are trying to figure out how to function with a smaller budget. And the budget largely goes towards education and access. And so I want to make sure we come back to remembering that this is all about nutrition education and nutrition access. So what have we been doing there? So the concept of wearables being the focus, I'm not a huge fan. But where it comes from, I think it's a good iteration in the conversation. And so let me first start by saying that where this all started was, we're going to do wearables because my pyramid was a failure. And the way my pyramid failed was it was too abstract and it wasn't very personalized. And so it didn't give people measurable ways to go forward. There wasn't accountability. It lacked accountability. So as an entrepreneur that's all about spitballing and brainstorming, to say, how could we help with accountability and personalization? What if we figured out a way to make Fitbits more accessible for people? That's not inherently a bad idea. They're talking about CGMs and other things, but then they're also noting that the goal is, hey, what if we made it so that insurance would cover these more readily for people and more proactively? What if there was insurance subsidy for Fitbits, which largely already exists as a lot of corporate wellness? And so it's not an uncommon thing. That said, the data that we have from corporate wellness and insurance groups that have done wearable interventions, the wearable alone has not really been shown to have a meaningful impact. And that will come back as we think about like education and access. But where this kind of took a little bit of a turn is you sort of two pieces. You have one, the criticism of my pyramid does two things. One, it blames education. It confuses education and intervention, which is the first thing. And it also skips an entire iteration. So for those of you that don't know, my pyramid was made in 1992. And it was that original pyramid that showed basically a split of all the food groups. It didn't have portion-specific guidance, which was one of the criticisms. It was fairly vague. It was just this visual representation of almost percentages of a pyramid. In 2005, they added the stairs on the side of it and had someone walking up the stairs. That was an attempt to emblematically show movement as an important piece of being healthy. So the comment being, this was a physical graphic that was meant to, at a glance, show you that you should be eating at least 30% of your diet from fruits and vegetables. You should be minimizing oils. You should have portioned amounts of carbohydrates, and you should have like limited amounts of desserts and treats and sweets. It is actually not bad information. What drives me nuts is that Maha over and over again, instead of saying that this education failed, which is to say that people clearly aren't doing this, they've said that the my pyramid way of eating has caused obesity. And that is incorrect. People aren't eating my pyramid. And frankly, if they were, we would actually be having positive health outcomes. Noting the average American doesn't even consume a serving of vegetables per week, right? So we're sitting here saying that my pyramid's guidance was 30% of your plate fruits and vegetables by just visual representation. 90% of people aren't anywhere even close to that. So to say that my pyramid, people started eating that way and then got fat is absolutely ludicrous and incorrect. That drives me nuts that they're jumping to that conclusion. To state that, hey, this educational attempt failed miserably is true. So that's a big piece. From there, though, in 2011, we got rid of my pyramid and replaced it with my plate, which was a next iteration, and it simplified it. It showed a plate with half the plate being fruits and vegetables, a quarter of it being protein, a quarter of it being grains, which, to be fair, is very good advice. Very simplified. Didn't seem to move the needle. What's interesting is Maha's addition to my plate is specifically that they want the grains to be more whole grain and less ultra processed, which
could agree with that.
I don't disagree with that either. What drove me nuts is how Twitter went nuts from a anti-Maha movement saying that they were trying to go keto and paleo, which also incorrect. That is gaslighting. That is trying to create basically a whataboutism discussion. It's a distraction from real progressive conversation, right? If you have an opinion, great, it's time to be squeaky, but let's be productively. That's not productively useful.
It's like promoting more whole foods based eating, which is an undeniable benefit.
Correct. And so it's one of those things where I wanted to point out that, one, it's very frustrating that Maha just ignored the My Plate because they want to pretend like that's actually their intervention. And then they want to just nudge it and say, oh, well, this like quarter of your plate that's grains, let's make it whole grains. So they're trying to take credit for something that's been around for 13 years. So like That's a big 14 years, a big red flag. So I hate how much that they've criticized the first iteration from literally 25 years ago and have ignored the second iteration, only to then come out with their quote unquote own iteration that's basically that one with a slight nuance. But I also do not enjoy that its opposition is blatantly lying about claims of being paleo and keto and all of that, when in reality it's a reduction in ultra processed foods, continuing to prioritize fruits and vegetables, all of that. So those are some of the pieces when we think about the timeline. We had My Pyramid. It didn't do a great job because it was very abstract. We've done My Plate, which was a bit more visually appealing, but has still obviously largely failed. And so their next iteration is, well, none of these are personal enough. So let's try wearable devices because it's going to help people hone in on what's going on with them. And that may trigger an individualist desire to improve things. It may encourage them to walk more. It may encourage them to strive to have a lower heart rate. It may show them what foods cause their blood sugar to do crazy things. That is not inherently a bad idea. If it can be financially viable, there is some potential validity. The question, though, is that actually going to help everybody? And the answer is no. There's a lot of people that level of information is just not going to be valuable. So you're going to end up getting some people that benefit from it and some people that don't. And to say that no one benefited from My Plate is also an incorrect notion, or no one benefited from My Pyramid. The ultimate question, though, is why aren't people eating more fruits and vegetables? That's really what we're trying to get down to. Every iteration from My Pyramid to My Plate to now Maha Plate, basically, to wearable devices is rooted in why aren't we eating more fruits and vegetables? Because that continues to be the largest differential and predictor of health. Presence of produce in the diet is the single largest factor that will improve the quality of the diet and the outcomes of the person.
Yeah, almost everyone could benefit from that.
Correct. That is the one blanket thing. And so we need to be thinking about this and saying, okay, our current, over the last 30 years, the billions to potentially trillions of dollars we've invested in education and access has failed, period. That doesn't mean it wasn't worthwhile. Go back to the prior topic we just talked about where I said lessons, not losses. The key there is you have to be willing to learn from it. And so I don't dislike the idea that we're sitting here saying, hey, what did we learn? My Pyramid failed. Why? My Plate also didn't land. Why? Where is this gap? And what can we do? And wearable devices is a step in personalization in the right direction. It is a cost, but if we're saying that the government's not planning on paying for this, that they're planning on encouraging insurance companies to do so, that may actually be a cool piece of this puzzle. That may be a positive nutrition education step, noting that a lot of our nutrition education from a educate the masses perspective has largely gone missing. That said, the ultimate question really is what is actually holding people back from eating more fruits and vegetables? And that's where you start to get into the access discussion. Is it that people don't actually know that fruits and vegetables are good for them?
Probably not.
I don't know that that's actually where we're at. So I don't know that I think nutrition education has failed. It just hasn't driven change. So do we need to continue to rebuild the pyramid, plate, whatever, every 10 years? Probably not. I think most people understand that like mostly produce would be good. So then why? So now we get zoomed into nutrition access. Is it because people don't have access to fruits and vegetables? Some people, for sure. Most people, no. That's definitely a small population, not an insignificant one, definitely one that needs addressed. But if we look at the real reason why people don't consume produce, it isn't because it's completely unavailable. Again, going back to the amount of people that have frozen fruits and vegetables in their freezer that they haven't used for years would suggest.
Or canned fruits and vegetables.
Or canned fruits and vegetables, right? Things that we're talking about, like it's because it's, they're perishable. So you have to be able to go to the grocery store every week. It's like, well, no, not necessarily. We live in a world where you can definitely get produce that lasts a long time and it's fairly affordable and it's incentivized. So why isn't it being eaten? And so what my critique, I will say, when we think about the recommendation of wearables is, while I understand the iteration of education it's coming from, to me, it shows how detached from reality the MAHA group is. As someone who spent over 10 years educating the public, wearing a wearable and then understanding the data on it and then using it is a very, very like well-developed and actionable intervention for those privileged enough to be at that level in the game. Most people just aren't even there. And so that is the people that are around him and in his cabinet that see that as a good idea are likely communicating with people that are not actually struggling with the core problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that becomes, it's out of touch. That would be a great thing. There's also, it is worth noting that our new Surgeon General conveniently owns a CGM company. So there is to say that needs to be, that bias needs to be, at least acknowledged. What I will say on the opposite side though, have you heard of fundamental attribution error?
I have.
Yeah. Okay. FAE, I won't say the full phrase again. FAE bias. It's a bias or heuristic. It is our tendency as humans to blame character, not environment. And
other people specifically.
To others specifically. And that is something, that is my critique to the anti-MAHA. If you're anti-MAHA for the sake of being anti-MAHA, you're probably not contributing to the conversation in a meaningful way. And you probably have really valid concerns, but once again, I want to hear you articulate them in a way that's productive and useful. And I don't want your responses to be bleeding FAE bias, which is to say, and there's a really famous influencer on Instagram that I actually really like her content as a net, but her FAE bias shined really brightly about this topic, where the underlying assumption was that Robert F. Kennedy and every person in his cabinet was inherently only and solely profit motivated and self-interested. And that is absolutely going to be incorrect.
Yeah.
Now,
there's nowhere to work with people from there. When you're attacking their character,
correct. You're just
really
saying
hard to find common ground that way.
They're encouraging wearables because they want to make money. Now, I'm not naive. Is that a part of it? 100%.
Yeah.
To say that has nothing to do with it is also oversimplified and idiotic. But the key behind fundamental attribution error is to shift your blame of character to environment and to recognize that, yes, in his environment, he has access to those resources, which biases him towards them being valuable. He likely has access to wealthy people and successful people and people that don't actually have food access issues. And he sees the benefits of these wearables for the subset of humans he's engaging with. So there is absolutely a proximity, and there's no doubt some sort of financial benefit. So those things play a role, but that doesn't mean that this still doesn't have some degree of desire to do good. And so if we can set aside the FAE bias that makes everything this man says suddenly wrong, it's like, no, probably not. Let's blame environment for a little while and drive a conversation, because to your point, if we blame his character and say he's just a profit-hungry narcissist in this for his own issues, well, the conversation's dead.
Yeah.
Which means nothing's going to progress forward. If we have the ability to assess the environment and say, oh, given his circumstance, right, his access and his wealth and his community, he probably is disconnected from reality, which the wearable recommendation kind of shows that disconnect. Maybe those of us out here that are more aware of those that would stand to gain or lose the most from these policy changes, maybe us, the people out here that know those people better, could speak to our concerns and shape his thinking. Because what I will say is, I have not yet seen an unwillingness to change thinking. I have seen a lot of bold proclamations, and I've seen those bold proclamations turn into dialogue, and I've seen those dialogues move the needle in some way. And so if you are trying to productively play the game of tug of war, which is that idea of they're coming with ideas, you and I talked about this a couple episodes ago, that if we only do what they said, we're going to help 20% of people. If we only do what their opponents say that think everything they say is stupid, we're only going to help 20% of people. But if we have productive conversations, we might be able to help 80% of people.
Yeah.
That conversation is where we're at right now. And so when I hear the wearable idea, that is not objectively just a stupid thing that we should be dismissing. We shouldn't be immediately trying to point at the financial disclosures. Doesn't mean we should be ignoring those things, but we need to be having productive conversations that then say, hey, The data on this shows mixed results in terms of its effectiveness. It also has a big financial burden that if you're talking about budget cuts, us using money to finance wearables to people that may not even have the technology to support them, may not have the health literacy to support them. There's a lot of gaps here that are going to end up, this is only going to help a small sect of people. That said, here's what we can do from a nutrition education standpoint that may be more valuable, right? Let's combine these things, right? Let's engage my plate a bit more aggressively, but let's come full circle and recognize that nutrition education can only be so much of this equation. We have to touch on nutrition access. And my comments on that side are that so far I have only seen the nutrition access side be the banning of bad to force the good.
Yep.
I will state, and we talked about this last time, that does need to be part of it, but it shouldn't be all of it. We need to come at the nutrition access from every side of it, which is to say, yes, if we are going to be using tax dollars, people's tax dollars, to fund food for those that have food insecurity, we definitely should be looking at are we encouraging them to eat things that are helping them or hurting them, right? And so I think there's definitely a piece of that where shaping what they have access to is not a bad idea from a zoomed out perspective. How you shape it becomes important. And what we've said, and we said last time, is shaping it from a place of addition, which is how can we encourage the vegetables. What I wanted to come full circle for is there have been a couple initiatives out there in the private sector that have acknowledged MAHA. One is called the Food Prescription Initiative, which is the initiative at a 1,000-foot view. I don't know the details into the extreme, is the idea that insurance companies should start prescribing fruits and vegetables instead of pills, or fruits and vegetables alongside pills. And there have been, we've actually as a company have been involved in some startups locally that have worked on this and have trialed this. And I will say, a lot of times it's the people don't eat them even when they have them. So before we spend billions of dollars giving food away, we've got to make sure that the food actually gets eaten. Look at food banks. So food prescription initiatives could be valuable. Go ahead.
No, keep going.
But there's details there that need to be considered. What's interesting is the food prescription initiatives have come out and said they like what MAHA's doing to encourage fruits and vegetables from a corralling people towards them. But now the other side, which is incentivizing them to use them, becomes the other piece of that puzzle. We do need to be careful about that part, because to prop up the food economy, right? So to subsidize fruits and vegetables is how we subsidized corn and created high fructose corn syrup that is so accessible and available that alternatives can't compete. But it also creates a level of reliance. Like those farmers rely on those subsidies, so then they start making more and more and more of it. So when we see 50 years later that we have so much corn, we don't know what to do with it, that is largely rooted in the math and the economy of corn subsidy. So if we're going to subsidize things, we need to think about the downstream consequences. This is taxpayer dollars paying for people's food. Is this just going to be a number that goes up every year? Is this going to be a number that goes up and creates outcomes? Is this a number that just goes up and up and up and up, which a lot of our interventions to date have been numbers that have gone up and up and up and up and up and have not actually created a meaningful change that's adjusted the curve. So all to say, I'm not taking a defined stance there. I'm saying that needs to be discussed more thoroughly. And so we're in a place now where we're seeing MAHA on their side oversimplifying some of the initiatives that have been to make room for their version. Their version shows their privilege, is what I'll state. That's just an honest take. It doesn't mean it's inherently the wrong direction, but it just might be the wrong declaration. Then we have an anti-MAHA group that is doing everything they can to basically make everything they say extreme, right? Like they're trying to push the keto diet on everybody and they just want our Surgeon General to be a billionaire. Check the FAE bias. Let's recognize that while we can't deny that some of those things could potentially be true, there may also actually be some desire to do good. So instead of you gaslighting and criticizing and focusing on what isn't from I'd even almost say like a combative and non-negotiation perspective, what if we helped them see what they can't see? Let's give the benefit of the doubt for just a moment in this conversation. Say, what if we assumed that the proposed path is rooted in lack of understanding? would you then spend less time criticizing for the sake of criticizing and spend more time helping them better understand? That is my entire intention of this podcast, is to take the time to dig through this gritty gray area, no matter how much people on the right and left call me whatever they call me, because this is a non-political, this is a human discussion. And
we all want people to be healthier.
We all want people to be healthier. And both sides are presenting a biased view, which is understandable, and they come from their own realities. And the only way we get through this is by sharpening each other's thinking. And so now we're in a place where we have a proposed idea that isn't inherently bad, but definitely misses a lot of people. And what I'd encourage is those that don't agree with it, the goal now would be to help the idea get better, sharpen the thinking. So how you're pointing the sword, right? Are you using a knife to help sharpen the thinking, or are you pointing a sword to attack the person with the first idea? That is right now the tug of war that I'd like to see shift and change. And like I said, I feel like the fundamental attribution error, the tendency to blame character, is just running rampant in this. We're in a place where we're trying to improve nutrition education by making it more personalized. Not inherently a bad idea, but how do you fund it? How do you educate on it? These are all questions that need answered, especially in the wake of budget cuts. So you're sitting here saying, we're about to cut these budgets like crazy, and now we're going to spend money on these things. Well, maybe not. Maybe you're figuring out ways to fund it privately, which, again, is that rooted in bias, or is that rooted in capitalism? Or is it a little bit of both? Probably a little bit of both. But from there, what are you going to do with this money then to help improve the access? And I have yet to really see the genuine discussion of, so what happens when or why is it actually that there have been dozens of these studies, probably hundreds, where we provide people with chronic disease and low income with boxes of fruits and vegetables and wearable devices, and nothing changes. And I don't mean nothing changes as in their metrics. I mean their participation. So it goes back to the formal question, why aren't people eating fruits and vegetables in the first place? That is the bigger piece. And so I'm very curious. This is more of the curiosity, because I don't know the downstream. I'm here to talk about it, not declare I know all. Is we ban certain things from basically what we'll call taxpayer government subsidized dollars so that it corrals people towards certain foods. And then we take it from the other side and we use food prescription initiatives and other initiatives to do kind of I'll call it the Devon dollar goes further campaign, which is, what if fruits and vegetables, the money from these various forms, went further with produce than they did with other things? Does curbing the access and then empowering the access, does that meaningfully move the needle of increased produce across families? And that's going to be hard to measure, because it's not increased produce in the household, it's increased produce consumed. So are we seeing people reporting, if we could go from the average American consumes one vegetable a week to the average American consumes one vegetable per day, that is the example of money well spent. That is the example of nutrition education and nutrition access coalescing to create an outcome that is undeniably valuable. And I want to be clear, we have failed at that thus far. We have not moved the needle on vegetable consumption meaningfully in multiple decades. That doesn't mean we can't. It means we need to sharpen our thinking, and we need to work together for that. So I'm genuinely curious. I think now is a really good time to definitely be offering criticisms of this kind of like what I'll call privileged wearable concept, noting that may not really address certain populations. It doesn't mean it isn't going to address some. How can we surround it to address more people, as opposed to just saying it's stupid, don't do it? Well, like, what right? I definitely want to continue to understand the funding and financing of it. We definitely want to be keeping a lookout for the overly capitalistic biases. It's one thing to use capitalism, it's another thing to abuse it. So I think there's factors we need to be there, but we need to be just as cautious of the idea of, hey, we're going to take these dollars and then just give them away, noting that means we're creating a reliance that's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger year over year, which is only worth it if it's actually creating a change. But if we're giving away all these fruits and vegetables and they're still not being eaten, we still haven't yet truly tapped into what the problem is. And it's such a complex multifactorial issue. So I'm very excited about it, but those are the big pieces I wanted to point out. So that's the my pyramid to my plate to Maha. It's hilarious to watch how things get politicized. The anti-Maha definitely doing some lies of omission and commission to try and poke holes in it, which feels more combative and more versus than it does feel collaborative. So I'd like to see more collaboration, because the ultimate reality is those that don't agree with Maha likely have good vantage points that Maha's not seeing. The reason that we're sitting here being squeaky wheels from the center is because we have vantage points that others aren't seeing. To think that and that's where I'm not arrogant enough in my own vantage point to think that I see all of it. I'm just saying what I see, hoping that I can connect it to what others see. And as a team, we can create an outcome that helps as many people as possible. And I feel like we're actually closer now than we were, because these conversations are being had, but only in time will we see, can we get enough people talking and dialoguing productively to actually shape nutrition education in a way that really does personalize it to some degree? And then can we shape nutrition access in a way that creates access that actually creates outcomes? And can we do those things in a way that is fiscally sustainable?
This is almost like a scenario where we're focused more so on the inputs than the outcomes, to our detriment, potentially.
Yeah, that's well said. It's been in government, we tend to see this over and over again. There's this problem, and the answer is more money, more money, more money, more money. And it's the Simon Sinek issue, leaders eat. It's basically the antithesis to the concept of leaders eat last, which is to say we watch these initiatives that have genuine intentions, and 20 years later, their budget is 10x, even in inflation-adjusted dollars. Their administration is 10x. Everyone's making a whole bunch of money, but the outcomes haven't changed. And so we're sitting here saying, we made it bigger and we put more in it and it didn't work. And if it was its own business, it'd be bankrupt. But it's not. It's government funded, so it's taxpayer dollars continuing to go to something. And so I'm, from an entrepreneurial lens, I look at that and say, that doesn't mean cut it and gut it, but that definitely means inspect it and fix it, like iterate it at bare minimum. If all that's happening is the budget's getting fatter and the administrative cost is going up, but the outcomes are not improving, we are still missing something. And so I don't love the sledgehammer, let's just gut it all, but I definitely don't love the let's give it more money and see if that works, because 20 times prior that didn't work. And so at some point we're doing the same thing to our insanity. And so yes, we are focused on input and not actually coming up to see if there's outcome. We definitely, my goal is that nutrition access and education are changed in a way that is more effective, that actually gets down to helping as many people as possible. Also recognizing that there are just plenty of people that just don't care. And so the goal of helping 100% of people is a genuine initiative, but it's not going to work. Like, it's help as many people as possible.
It's want to be helped.
Yeah. Willingness to participate in your own rescue is a requirement of any good initiative. There needs to be a desire to do better. We can give them all the access and vegetables and opportunities in the world, but they still have to want to participate in it, in these, these communities. And so I want to make sure we're surrounding this whole thing. And in an ideal world, we're doing it recognizing that there is merit to all of this, a desire to personalize my pyramid to my plate to this next iteration, recognizing that in 1992, the technology didn't exist. In 2005, the technology didn't exist. In 2012, it existed, but it wasn't great and it was still very unaffordable. We now live in a world where you can get a $20 Fitbit on Amazon. And so the concept of wearable devices, now CGMs are a whole different level of wearable. That said, there may be, if insurance is going to cover it, now we're having a completely different conversation. Then we have the conversation of, now that they have the data, what are they doing with it? Is it actually useful? Are people engaging with it? Do they understand it well enough to do anything about it? And is that a way that motivates a majority of people? Some people will definitely be motivated by that. In my experience, as a dietitian that's seen 15,000 plus patients in my career, most people are not. That is like 10% of people. And so I think that once again comes from a very motivated group that are very like and it's hilarious because you start to realize the political group that's focusing on it are the people that are very like self-empowerment and self-ownership. So it's like, oh, it's not surprising that the self-ownership people are promoting policies that are self-ownership. And so do I think it's going to help the masses? Not in its current state. Is crapping all over it and then not being productively conversational and challenging to help sharpen it useful? No. So let's figure out a way to make it more valuable. Let's watch how it actually can evolve from an economic viability standpoint. And then let's double back to, okay, so far we're only banning things. How are we empowering things? Noting that the reason that hasn't come up yet, like I said, the health prescription initiatives and the health, basically what we'd call the produce subsidy initiatives, those do exist. They're in the private sector. They've acknowledged MAHA and a desire to work with them. There have not been collaborative things declared yet, but the reason is because that is a more complicated piece of this. One, budgets are getting cut, but we don't know by how much. So these groups can't really allocate budgets towards nutrition prescription until they know what budget they have so they can allocate in the first place. So I don't doubt in the next year we will see these health prescription initiatives where produce gets prescribed, or there's a subsidy towards it, or there's not just a ban of sugary things, but also an empowerment towards your dollar goes further with apples. Those things are likely to come. But then more importantly, okay, over the next 3 to 5 years, do they move the needle? Are we throwing away a bunch of produce, or are they actually chewing it and swallowing it? And maybe the answer this whole time has been fridge-scaping.
Full circle. You knew how to get me right back in there.
I love it. I love it.
I have some thoughts.
Please share.
I really loved your explanation of that. And I've been on both sides of public health nutrition intervention. I went to pretty low income elementary school, and I remember, I didn't know they were dietitians at the time, but I remember these people would come to my school and they would come to the classroom and they would educate on, back then it was the pyramid because I'm old, and they would actually, every time they came, we loved it because we got snacks. They would bring a different fruit or vegetable every time for us to try, recognizing that, well, I know this now after the fact, but at the time I was unaware that a big reason they were doing that was because a lot of these kids that were in my class and a lot of these kids' parents and caregivers had never tried these fruits and vegetables, didn't know how to prepare them, didn't know what they looked like or tasted like. And if you've never tried something, you're going to be a little bit leery of it. Or if you're just, maybe you've tried it, but it's not something you have regularly as part of your diet. So I thought that was a really cool initiative.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And that was through SNAP-Ed, which we know is one of those things that's not being axed, but it's being shifted to the state's going to be responsible for it. So we know that that's maybe a little bit unpredictable how that's going to shake out.
The budget reallocation is still up in the air.
Vary from state to state. So that's just like one memory that sticks out in my mind of something that I thought was really cool. And maybe it's because, I became a dietitian. I had an inherent interest in nutrition.
You're an example of somebody that it helped.
It benefited me.
And that's where we can hear, it's what I said prior, is to say that these haven't helped anybody is incorrect. But the question of why hasn't it meaningfully increased produce and produce in particular, that is something we still need to genuinely be inspecting, because you start to realize it's okay. The same kids that lived in food scarce environments that were getting that exposure, they now have the exposure. Do they have the access? It's like, well, if they're shopping in a food desert and they're going and most of their food comes from gas stations, produce is perishable, and it also has the lowest margin. Like the average grocery store makes 5% on fruits and vegetables, and they make 30% on packaged foods. And so you're either going to buy, basically a grocer is going to, and this is even worse for gas stations because they're convenience, is going to buy something that they can make 5% on if they sell it within a week, or buy something they can make 30% on and they can sell it within 2 years. One of those is a very, very simple, straightforward, positive business decision. The other is gambling.
Yeah.
So that's even worse at at gas stations, where they don't have the same food purveyors. So vegetables and fruits are even more expensive, and people are coming in for convenience. And so they're like some of the least convenient foods. So the margin for profit is not really there. The perishability makes it so that they're going to buy 100 bananas, sell 3 of them, lose on 97 of them. And the margin doesn't let them make their money back. So they will lose money on produce versus make money on those other things. So now we get to have, and this is I'm not going to claim to have this answer. So now we have okay, well, yes, gas stations don't carry a lot of produce because the margins are not great and it's perishable. So it's high risk sales. They carry a lot of convenience because people like convenience and because there's a shelf life that allows them to basically mitigate their risk is what we're looking at. So this is the economics of this food desert reality. We're now saying that the candy bars are not going to be on the SNAP. Okay, so some of the non-perishable shelf-stable stuff is not as accessible. Our comment is, does that actually meaningfully relocate people to the apples and bananas that are in the baskets?
Yet to be seen.
Yet to be seen, probably not. You likely need something that either helps the person buy the banana or helps the business not lose its ass by buying the banana.
Yeah. Or maybe, make them more likely to buy it by teaching them how to use it. Like that was on the other side of public health nutrition intervention was a study that I was a researcher for in college, graduate school, that was bringing mothers or caregivers with their 5 years old or younger child to a community kitchen and showing them how to prepare a recipe and then educating them on the nutrition benefits of the recipe and then actually sending them home with all the groceries to make the recipe at home with the recipe. They also provided transportation to and from the community center, so that wasn't a barrier to access. And it was a pretty successful intervention. They saw positive health outcomes both in the parents and the children. Yeah. And so if I were to talk to RFK, if I was to talk to the people at Maha like a coach, the same way I would talk to a client, I would first celebrate the intention and all the positive things that they have done so far, because I think that that's really important to start the conversation on a positive end. I think they have made, some good moves thus far. Yeah,
there's some good intentions and there's some good ideas. We're still very much in the idea stage. Yeah. And there are no bad ideas in the idea stage, but if we went straight from idea to action, a lot of times things would get missed. And that's what people are worried about right now is these ideas. If they were just literally integrated overnight, we're still missing. We left a lot of people behind.
Yes, absolutely. And then, on the back end of celebrating the intention and the current wins and successes and positive things that have been done, maybe discouraging some of the stuff that's less nutrient dense, I would offer the feedback of maybe, either you yourself have more exposure to people that are directly impacted by food insecurity and who benefit from a lot of the government SNAP benefits and things, or surround yourself with those people who do have direct connection and experience and work with those types of people or have experienced that themselves. So that would be my feedback. And speaking as one of those people that does surround myself and work really closely with people that do have food insecurity, I would say exactly what you're saying. How can we get people to eat more fruits and vegetables? That would be the questioned answer. And I would love to see the marketing campaign for let's make vegetables sexy again. Let's find ways to prepare them that's easy.
We're bringing veggies back.
We're bringing veggies back. I love it. If you've ever seen I'll have to find it and send it to you. Bill Burr had a joke about he's like, I don't understand why people are saying healthy eating is so expensive. He's like, when I go to the produce section, they're practically giving that stuff away. Yeah,
exactly. Bananas are 19 cents a pound. It's it's not really what's getting us.
Which I'm not saying I agree with that by any means. I do understand. Yeah. But I'm it's interesting that produce can be really affordable. Yes. But it's a matter of, do we know how to prepare it? Or is it convenient enough for someone who's working 2 jobs and supporting a family on a single income?
You start recognizing the convenience aspect wins so often.
Yeah.
And that becomes what we were talking about, why I teased about the fridge scaping is, are there ways we can make produce more convenient? And you go to a Sheetz now and there's the little fruit cups and there's the little veggie cups, which is trying to make those things as convenient as possible. They're definitely priced accordingly. So that's one of the pieces, is because they're more convenient. We now have a perishable food, which is a cost risk, that is more convenient, which is a time value. So now we have those two things making it expensive, and it prices out. So you can either spend $5.99 on celery, carrots, and ranch dip, or you can spend $2 on an Uncrustable, right? And that's just the reality that we need to dig into. The comment being, is banning the Uncrustable the option? No, probably not. Is making the vegetables $2 too the option? Maybe, but my hunch says that it probably is those two things to some degree, and a third thing, which is people aren't eating veggies and fruits for reasons that go beyond just cost and go beyond just access.
Absolutely.
And so that becomes the piece of this, that when those two things, when we create a policy that surrounds this the best we can, we're going to then need to adjust it based on what outcomes we see. How can we get people moving towards produce? And I think making it more accessible, definitely a piece. Making it more portable, making it more available, make it more cost considerate for the buyer and for the seller. These are all things that have value. Recognizing that because processed foods are become so efficient, that they may in fact be a level of financial scale that's just like, you can't even compete. Like that's where you go, oh, well then how do we, and that's, you start hearing that, well, we should tax these foods or we should ban these foods. And you start to hear all of these are just ideas. And there's people are arguing on these ideas based on their perspective and their reality and their environment. And none of those environmental reports are wrong. In fact, they're more necessary than ever so that we can figure out what combo ratio of these things has the greatest good. Coming back real quick to, you mentioned that initiative that you were a part of, where, you have people being driven and being all, basically level of hand holding to the extreme. There's two outcomes we need to think about there. One, is that something that if you do it for a short period of time yielded sustainable results? Which is to say, you do that for someone for 3 months. Do they then for the next 3 years independently shop for more vegetables and other things? Or do they immediately go back to their other food reality? If the answer is they immediately go back to their food reality, we recognize that it isn't an education issue, it is an environmental issue. Then we say, okay, well, what if we just funded this perpetually? Is that sustainable? My hunch is the answer is absolutely not. Over time, that's going to be a cost reality that just isn't viable. So we can hear the same argument coming back and forth is this education actually the answer? Is the funding of it, is it making it so easy that they can't say no to it, actually driving meaningful long-term outcomes? And if not, if that's not the case, then we go, okay, it's not that these initiatives are wrong or failed, but it's that they're still missing something. And to some degree, a piece of this at bare minimum is we want to help as many people as possible, recognizing that there are some people that just aren't going to care and aren't going to change. And we do have to decide how we're going to reconcile that, what we're going to do about that. Acceptance of that may be the answer. I don't know. That's starting to get a little bit on the ledge or edge of my understanding and knowledge at that point. But those initiatives are those one-stop shops that are really cool and very useful to show. But it's just like when we talked about the carbs only study earlier in this episode. Great. That's interesting. Now what? And that's okay. So we drove a bunch of people and forced them to do a whole bunch of things, which if we tried to have them do that for 5 years, they wouldn't have opted into the study because you can only commit that much time for so long. Did that education lead to meaningful changes in their environment? Or was it like a Biggest Loser show where you take people to a cabin and over-exercise them and starve them for 6 months and then send them back home to eat their favorite cake and pizza? And we wonder why 95% of the participants were heavier after the show, right? It's like, we didn't teach them anything. We just removed them from their environment. Well, that itself is useful. That means it's an environmental issue. So how do we change the environment? Is it education? Is it subsidy? Is it subsidy? Is it curbing and corralling and directing? Are there ways to empower them? Well, wearables are empowerment. Food bans are corralling. Subsidy is encouraging. You can hear we're discussing all of these areas, and some balance of them is likely going to need to be the answer within a budget that is sustainable and replicable long enough to show that it's useful so that we can then either keep doing it or adjust it accordingly. That'd be the thing I hope to see in the future. I want to see policy more nimble based on genuine inputs and outcomes.
Just like if it were a business, right?
Yeah, because it is ultimately, it is a taxpayer funded business. If we're going to rely on the government to impose things, if that is how we are choosing to use government, it is a business in many ways. So that is something that we need to start thinking about that way. If it's going to be in charge of that, we better be holding it accountable to the successes of it. Otherwise, we're just pouring money into something. And for every person that got pissed off when the banks got bailed out or when the car companies get bailed out, it's the same thing, right? At what point are these government groups that aren't doing what we need them to be doing, are we just bailing them out? And that's doesn't mean sludge hammer and gut it, but it definitely means figure out a way to do it better. And there are so many sharp minds that care about what we're talking about that, man, if we could put our like biases and egos aside and actually have good conversations, we could probably figure this out.
Yeah.
And if not, you know, ChatGPT will let us know soon enough.
Yeah, that's the line, isn't it?
Yeah. And with that.
That concludes our 6 talk. Well, wow. I'm so glad that we got to dive into that because I think we covered a lot of topics, but that last one is, I think it's very near and dear to both of us because it's so relevant to the people that we help. Yeah. And we all have the same goal of making people healthier. So good stuff.
I'll continue to zoom out and do my best to point out biases and show a centrist view and hopefully shape and sharpen the thinking. But that pro-dialogue is that intent. What can we do to play the tug of war that lands us in the place where the most people benefit, where we create the most wins possible in the most sustainable way possible?
Yeah. Well, with that,
I love it. Appreciate you guiding us as always. Yes. Thanks for listening, everybody. It's always a pleasure. And until next time, be well.
Be well.